Procedural notes. This meeting will be held electronically as per section 19(1) of the town's procedural bylaw number 6228-19 as amended due to the COVID-19 situation. Council, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Councilor Kim, Councilor Gardner, any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. No community presentations. We do have one delegation, Mr. Nikolas Papapetrou, Senior Development Manager, SmartCentres, and Bliss Edwards, SmartStop Self-Storage regarding item 8.6, application for site plan approval, Aurora Self-Storage Inc., and 1623 Wellington Street Developments Limited. Mr. Papapetrou, are you there? Nikolas, how are you?
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the committee. Just pulling up my presentation.
Sure. I'll just remind you, you have 5 minutes, Nikolas.
Okay, thank you. Everybody see the presentation?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So good evening, members of the committee. My name is Nikolas Papapetrou. I'm joined tonight by Bliss Edwards from SmartStop Self-Storage. We are here in support of our application for site plan approval to permit the first phase of development of our lands on the south side of Wellington Street East. We obtained approval to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw from Council in November 2020 to permit a wider range of uses, including self-storage and automotive dealership uses. And since then, we've submitted our site plan application in February 2021 to permit the self-storage use, and have addressed the comments from staff and the urban design review panel in our latest submission. We also understand that the Dilwari Group's site plan application is also on the agenda tonight to permit the development of the first automotive dealership, which will be a BMW branded dealership. The overall concept for the lands continues to be a mixed-use business park in a campus-style setting. Access to the business park will be provided via the extension of Goulding Avenue, which SmartCentres is currently constructing, and we hope to complete later this year and turn over to the town. Our first phase consists of the proposed self-storage building. It's located in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, together with the internal road system. Road A, which is the central spine road running east-west, will provide access and servicing to the SmartStop self-storage building, the BMW dealership, as well as the future development blocks. The BMW dealership is shown in blue on your screen. We are proposing a robust landscaping plan around the entire perimeter, consisting of a wide range of plant and tree species. The Goulding Avenue frontage is further enhanced with additional landscaping in response to comments received from staff and the urban design review panel. The proposed self-storage building will be 4 stories in height with an approximate gross floor area of 13,000 square meters. It's very similar to what was presented to council in November of 2020. Our elevations consist of high quality building materials, including metal paneling, glazing, and stone masonry along the base. That was a comment received back from the urban design review panel, and we've revised the elevations accordingly. These are some photos of another project in Ontario with the materials shown here in real life examples. This is another a recently completed project in Brampton. Again, this is just before the landscaping was done. So this site will be fully landscaped, similar to our proposal for the Aurora Business Park. We are in support of staff's recommendation and are available to answer any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, first, can I get a motion to receive and refer to item 8.6? Councillor Thompson, second, Councillor Gardner. Any comments or questions for the delegate? Councillor Gardner, right?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very pleased to see the plantings around the perimeter, especially the trees. I didn't catch, is there any vision to do plantings on the interior of this area? It's such a large area.
Nikolas?
Through you, Mr. Chair. This is a concept plan of the internal road system. So as you can see, we're heavily landscaping the internal drive aisles. And yes, all of the future development parcels would be subject to the city's urban design guidelines for this corridor, which also ask for enhanced levels of landscaping, similar to what we're proposing for the SmartStop self-storage building. So at this point, we can't show you those plans because we don't really have any future real plans, but rest assured the rest of the lands will be landscaped to a high quality level.
Councillor?
Thank you, and I appreciate the enhanced level of landscaping. I'm particularly interested in trees. When we say landscaping, it's it can be bushes and small plantings, but we really need the trees. So appreciate anything that you can do to help us add to our tree canopy.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions for the delegates? Seeing none, Nikolas, Bliss, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Council, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We have nothing on the consent agenda. Advisory committee meeting minutes. Anyone have a question or would like one of those items pulled? Otherwise, I'll ask for a motion to approve 7.1 and 7.2. Can I get that? Someone like to move that? Councillor Kim. Second. Councillor Gardner. Sorry, Councillor Gardner, I didn't see your hand there.
No, Mr. Mayor, there seems to be so much hesitancy to move, so I just put my hand up to be the second.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, I got a mover and a seconder. No comments, no questions. I'll call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Move to items requiring discussion, our regular agenda. We will begin with 8.1. I know that we have the delegates are here, and I'll move those ones to being second and third because we do have members from York Region here to present in regards to the MCR update. So we'll go forward with 8.1 and then we'll move those other items forward for our delegates. So 8.1 is the Region of York MCR update, Aurora 2051 growth forecast. And we have a presentation to be provided by Paul Bottomley, Manager, Policy Research and Forecasting, Region of York. Paul, where are you? There you are.
Right here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good to see you. And actually, I do know that you're going to need more than the 10 minutes allowed for a presentation. And so, Council, just from a procedural perspective, I believe, Paul, you need 20 minutes. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's around 20 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. So, Council, can I waive the procedural bylaw to allow for a 20-minute presentation? Would someone like to move and second that? Councillor Thompson, second. Councillor Gallo. All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? That carries. Paul, floor is yours.
Okay, great.
Mr. Freeman, welcome. I just saw you too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mr. Mayor, that Mr. Freeman's here as well, so he might actually want to introduce this project and before I start.
Yes, Mr. Freeman, welcome, and yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Marakis and members of committee. My name is Paul Freeman. I'm the Chief Planner at York Region, and we're pleased to be here tonight. This is a key milestone in the Municipal Comprehensive Review to update the York Region official plan, and I'm going to turn it over to Paul in a minute to walk you through an extensive presentation that is important because it speaks about 30 years of growth. It's an outlook to 2051 now by the changes to the growth plan. And it's a significant amount of growth that you'll see that we are planning for as a result of the growth plan changes by the province. So with that, I'll turn it over to Paul to share his screen and walk you through the presentation, and we'd be happy to answer questions at the end.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, so can you see that on the screen okay?
Yep, thank
All
you.
right. Through you, Mr. Mayor, members of the committee, I'm really pleased to be here tonight. As Mr. Freeman had mentioned, the region's currently updating its official plan to conform to the growth plan and its 2051 planning horizon. So staff at the region have completed a number of background work and studies and are working towards a Q4 release of the draft regional official plan later this year. And back in March the 18th, regional staff presented material on the forecast and on the land needs to 2051 to regional council. So this presentation is a version of that material. So I'll be covering results of the provincially mandated land needs assessment. I'll talk a little bit about the proposed location for urban expansion, forecast by local municipality, and then finish with the importance of an integrated growth management approach and phasing of growth to 2051, and then conclude with next steps. So just to start off, the provincial growth plan forecasts call for the region to attract the largest share of growth in the Greater Toronto Hamilton area. York Region has a 22% share, as shown by the purple figures. It's slightly above the shares for both Peel and Toronto. The blue figures show York's historical growth shares of 27%, second only to Peel Region and Peel Region between 1986 and 2016. You can see the figures on the bottom right. They show York Region's 2051 forecast. That's 2.02 million people, 990,000 jobs. It's growth of 800,000 people and 345,000 jobs over the next 30 years. So when we plan for growth, we're required to conform to provincial plans, and listed on the slide are several provincial documents that provide direction to municipalities. They include the growth plan, as well as the provincial land needs assessment methodology. All municipalities in the Greater Golden Horseshoe are required to conform to growth plan policy and targets, as well as use the mandated provincial methodology to calculate land needs to 2051. The province has also been very clear that urban areas cannot be expanded into the green belt, and staff's land needs work is in line with this provincial direction. So I mentioned the growth plan's planning horizon. It's been extended to 2051. In fact, this is the first time in Ontario that the planning horizon is 30 years. Previously, municipalities planned up to roughly a 20-year horizon. And I also mentioned, of course, that the provincial methodology is a mandated methodology that municipalities are required to use in calculating land. And the methodology is premised on achieving a 50% minimum intensification target. And that target applies within the built-up area, so the existing built-up area of the region. And there's also a 50 people and jobs per hectare designated greenfield area density target that applies to communities outside the built-up area and within the approved urban areas throughout the region. The method also places emphasis on a market-based approach in determining future housing needs. And Watson was retained by the region to assess the housing market and provide commentary into the region's housing type forecast 2051. So the results of the methodology are shown here. 2,300 hectares of community land and 1,100 hectares of new employment land are needed to accommodate the region's growth out to 2051. And listed on the slide are some of the key assumptions behind the analysis. And I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail, but for community land needs, the region's population growth of 800,000 people, that translates into a requirement for 276,000 new housing units. And I mentioned half of these units fall within the existing built-up area in the region in order to reach the 50% intensification target. And most of the rest is applicable to the designated greenfield area. And that's where a demand supply analysis is undertaken to determine the need for an urban expansion. So the forecast has a demand of units, and that demand is compared to the supply of units in the region's approved urban area. And the analysis actually indicates that we do need an urban expansion. And as mentioned, the result is 2,300 hectares of community land. And just to picture that, it's roughly 6 concession blocks of land. The region's employment forecast is also done using a similar exercise. The 345,000 jobs are distributed into 4 employment types: major office employment area, population related and rural area, but it's the employment area category. That's jobs in our industrial, in our business parks. That's key to determining land requirements. Staff have also undertaken a fair amount of work looking at employment trends, automation potential by sector to help determine employment growth by type, and rapid growth in knowledge-based sectors, transportation and warehousing in the sector, as well as modest growth in manufacturing and declines in retail is a quick summary of the anticipated trends moving forward. The impact of COVID-19 on the economy was also considered, but the full extent of the pandemic over the long term is not yet well understood. So greater emphasis was placed on the trends that I just mentioned. And the demand supply analysis for employment tells us that 1,100 hectares of urban expansion land is needed, and that's just under 3 concession blocks of land. And so when we add the 2,300 to the 1,100, it totals 3,400 hectares of land required to accommodate growth in the region out to 2051. So aside from urban expansion, 50% of the region's growth to 2051, as I mentioned, is planned as intensification. And that growth will occur within the region's 4 urban growth centers. We've got 78 major transit station areas along corridors in the region. And of course, there's other infill areas that can accommodate intensification. In Aurora, there is the Aurora GO Station major transit station area, the Promenade area, as well as smaller scale infill areas that can contribute towards the intensification target. Since 2006, the housing market has been delivering 50% across the region, and regional council and civil levels of government have invested $3.2 billion in transit infrastructure, and this investment has acted as a catalyst for growth. And of course, we've got the $5.6 billion Yonge North Subway Extension project that will provide further opportunities for intensification moving forward. I mentioned Watson Consulting, and they've done an assessment for us looking at the housing market in the region, and they concluded that 50% intensification is an appropriate target to plan for out to 2051. So there are 3 geographic areas in the region known as the White Belt lands, and these lands are identified in white on the map, and they can accommodate urban expansion. They include the Markham, Wichita-Stouffville area in the southeast part of the region, the Vaughan King area in the southwest, and East Gwillimbury in the north. As already mentioned, 3,400 hectares of these White Belt lands are needed by 2051, and that translates into roughly 80% of all of the White Belt lands. Over the long term, beyond 2051, all of the White Belt will be needed for growth. But in considering locations for 80% of these lands to 2051, staff undertook a cost per capita analysis for the full build out of each of these 3 White Belt geographies. And the purpose of this cost per capita analysis was to inform regional council of the transportation as well as the water and wastewater costs for each area, recognizing that in addition to these costs, there are large-scale region-wide infrastructure projects such as the Duffin Creek treatment plant expansion that will also be required to support growth in any one of these 3 areas. So starting with the White Belt areas in the southeast part of the region, this area can support growth of 85,000 people, 20,000 jobs. The cost per capita is $4,600, and the preliminary infrastructure costs are estimated at $480 million. White Belt areas in the southwest part of the region support growth of 90,000 people, 40,000 jobs. You can see the cost per capita is $6,900, and preliminary infrastructure costs are estimated at $900 million for that area. And growth in Northern York, it's planned to be serviced by the Upper York Servicing Solution that provides wastewater capacity for East Gwillimbury and parts of Newmarket. It's an entirely new investment that requires multiple phases of expansion, but it does support long-term growth of 150,000 people, 55,000 jobs in Northern York, and the cost per capita is $7,600, and the total costs for infrastructure are estimated at $1.6 billion. So the next 3 slides, they present regional staff's proposal for urban expansion locations to 2051. It's based on information from the March 18th report to Regional Council. And starting with the proposed geography in the southeast of the region, it includes all of the White Belt lands. The slide details the proposed distribution of land uses for community uses in orange, employment uses in purple within Markham and Wichita-Stouffville. And you can see the table in the lower left includes the proposed urban expansion area and the land use distribution in hectares. In terms of opportunities for this area of the region, the southeast part is closest to a number of the downstream water and wastewater infrastructure invested over the last 10 years. So future growth takes advantage of that previous investment. The area also includes future employment lands in Wichita-Stouffville, adjacent to Markham's employment lands in the vicinity of the Highway 404. In terms of challenges, housing affordability is the most significant risk associated with growth in this area. And in fact, it's a risk that is prevalent across all of Southern York. For example, the price of ground-related homes for young families may be problematic, which in turn may impact the pace of growth and the recovery of development charges. Moving on to the proposed geography of urban expansion in the Southwest. Once again, it includes all of the White Belt lands. The table once again shows the proposed distribution in hectares for Vaughan and for King. And the proposed alignment of the GTA West corridor is also shown on this map. Once again, this area leverages the downstream water, wastewater infrastructure investment over the past 10 years. It also provides for well-located employment lands along Highway 427, as well as the planned GTA West corridor. And on the flip side, some of these some of this future job growth could take longer to materialize, as it's contingent on the timing of the GTA West corridor and may also require water wastewater upgrades in the long term. And of course, like Southeast York, the price of housing may impact the pace of growth and development charge collections. Moving on to the northern part of the region, there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding the timing of the Upper York servicing solution. Proposed urban expansion in this area includes 180 hectares of community land up to Mount Albert Road, except for a small portion of land southwest of Yonge Street. And there's also a proposed expansion of roughly 65 hectares of employment land along Highway 404. So the Upper York servicing solution is currently scheduled for completion in 2028. And once in operation, it will provide capacity for roughly 90,000 people in East Gwillimbury as well as Newmarket. But it also allows for a transfer capacity to service growth of 30,000 people in Newmarket, as well as the town of Aurora via the YDSS. So the timing and the uncertainty of servicing in this part of the region was the key factor in forming the amount of urban expansion in East Gwillimbury. And you can see we've not included all the White Belt lands in this area. So I've discussed the land needs assessment results, the proposed geography for urban expansion. In the next few slides, I'm going to touch on the proposed local municipal forecasts. The first slide shows the 2016 population in blue and the 2051 forecast population for all 9 municipalities. Growth is expected to be driven by different factors within each municipality. Similar to historic trends, the majority of the region's population is forecast for Southern York, a 74% share, and the graph shows the scale of growth for Markham, for Richmond Hill, and for Vaughan. Southern York also has access to rapid transit, and growth is anticipated to be driven by significant intensification, and both Vaughan and Markham will also experience significant amount of greenfield growth. In East Gwillimbury, Georgina, King, and Wichita-Stouffville, growth will be largely driven by greenfield development with smaller amounts of intensification, whereas most of the growth in Newmarket will be intensification with access to a regional center and bus rapid transit, while growth in Aurora will be a fairly even mix of both greenfield and intensification units. And you can see Aurora's 2051 population is anticipated to be just under 85,000 people, and that's up from 63,400 today, roughly a 21,500 increase. So the next slide shows housing growth from 2016 to 51, showing intensification within the built-up area in blue compared to the designated greenfield area in pink. And the intensification targets by municipality are also shown. So you see targets range from 86% in Newmarket to 77% in Richmond Hill to 3% in East Gwillimbury. And the information clearly shows the large number of forecasted intensifications in Markham at 50,000 units, as well as Vaughan and Richmond Hill. It also shows the large number of greenfield units forecasted in Markham, Vaughan, and East Gwillimbury. Aurora also provides opportunities to accommodate a share of the region's greenfield growth, as the town provides an ideal market for ground-related homes. And Aurora's housing type forecast calls for 57% ground-related homes and 43% apartments. There's also 4,600 intensification units that are anticipated to be built within the town's existing built-up area. And you can see that the town's intensification target is 45%. And that's an increase from the 29% rate that was recorded between 2006 and 2019. So the Aurora GO station is well placed to attract intensification. And there's also additional opportunities assumed within the promenade area, as well as the broader Aurora community. The local municipal employment forecasts are shown here. Both Markham and Vaughan are forecast to accommodate nearly 2/3 of the region's employment growth. Vaughan is anticipated to add 130,000 jobs, Markham 127,000 jobs, Richmond Hill 44,000 jobs is the next highest job forecast. Aurora's 2051 total is 41,000. That's up from 27,300 in 2016. So the job growth represents roughly 50% of Aurora's stock. And in terms of growth by employment type, employment area jobs are anticipated to attract the largest share of jobs in the town at 54%. And that's followed by jobs that service the population at 31%. And that includes retail, local services, as well as work at home. And then there's major office jobs at 14%. And this slide provides some more context for Aurora's population forecast. It lists historical growth by 10-year period from 2001, or 1981 rather, as well as forecast growth out to 2051. And Aurora grew by 760 people on average each year over the last 20 years. And the forecast calls for an average growth of 700 people over the horizon to 2051. Aurora's share of the region's population forecast is 3%, and that compares to 5% recorded over the last 20 years. So there's several observations and considerations for Aurora's growth over the next 30 years. The town's forecast calls for a fairly balanced growth between greenfield and intensification. Intensification will play a more prominent role in the latter part of the forecast as the greenfield land supply diminishes. Over a third, or 37%, of Aurora's household growth is anticipated to be in apartments, and the town is planning for more choice in the housing market moving forward with an increased role for intensification. I mentioned the intensification rate for the town increases from 29% to 45%. There's also potential for intensification, as I mentioned, primarily within the Aurora GO MTSA, major transit station area, the promenade area, and with smaller scale infill opportunities throughout the town, for example, the Highland Gate proposal and development within the Aurora South community. The town's total housing stock is anticipated to be 78% ground related and 22 apartments by 2051. And that compares to 89% ground related and 11% apartments in 2016. The growth plan also requires the region to include local municipal designated greenfield area density targets. And this target is put in place to promote transit supportive complete communities. And the average density target for Aurora is 55 people and jobs per hectare. And for Aurora, this target is a function of communities already built in the town, as well as those already planned. And the target, in fact, it's consistent with what has been built in Aurora. We've looked at examples in the area 2B and area 2C in the town, and they've averaged roughly 54 or 55 people jobs per hectare. On the employment side, Aurora's jobs are forecast to grow, as I mentioned, by 50% to 2051. Employment area growth along Highway 404 is anticipated to drive the most job growth. Aurora, of course, is home to some of the region's top employers, such as Magna, Desjardins Insurance, TC Transcontinental, And employment areas in the town are attractive to potential employers as they do provide frontage onto Highway 404, as well as proximity to the Aurora GO station. It's also important that the town maintain a healthy activity rate, and this rate measures jobs to population. And the current region official plan target has a policy goal of providing one job for every 2 residents, which equates to an activity rate of 50%. And Aurora's activity rate is forecast to remain in line with the region's target of 50%. So one of the main themes of the region's forecast and land needs work presented to Regional Council included the importance of a more integrated approach to growth management and phasing new development and infrastructure. And this will help mitigate risk as the region plans to achieve the forecasts in a financially sustainable manner. And I'm going to quickly walk through this theme for the remainder of the presentation. So since 2005, regional councils have invested in the order of $7.6 billion in capital infrastructure. And in recent years, the region has been experiencing a lower rate of growth than what's been forecasted, and has taken steps to mitigate the impact of this slower growth. The region's financial sustainability is strongly tied to the pace of growth, and a fiscal strategy was put in place back in 2014 to manage the region's debt. And actions have also been taken through the annual budget to help mitigate the impact of slower growth. And the fiscal strategy, it's adopted every year. It allows the region to better align infrastructure projects with actual growth and development charge or DC collections. And of course, DC collections, they are critical to funding both new infrastructure as well as paying down debt. And if we don't achieve anticipated growth rates, we will need to defer the next generation of new growth rate infrastructure investments. There's a further $11.6 billion in new infrastructure that's required to accommodate the 2051 forecast. So it becomes increasingly important to capitalize on existing infrastructure before making new investments and to phase or stage investments according to the actual pace of growth. So in addition to significant water, wastewater, transportation capital infrastructure required to support growth, there are upgrades to the region's transit network that will also be key to supporting both intensification and greenfield growth. And you can say it was, of course, great to hear the federal government's recent announcement to commit funding for the planned $5.6 billion Yonge North subway extension. And in addition to that project, a further $5.4 billion in unfunded bus rapid transit infrastructure is required, of which $1.1 billion of that 5.4 is anticipated to be the region's share based on previous cost-sharing agreements for transit projects in the province. So listed on the slide are a number of these bus rapid transit projects with preliminary cost estimates also provided. They include extensions to Highway 7, extensions to Yonge Street, as well as the new bus rapid transit infrastructure on Jane Street, Major Mackenzie Drive, and Leslie Street. So planning for growth of 800,000 people and 345,000 jobs out to 2051, and the amount of urban expansion required, that 3,400 hectares, is in fact unprecedented. And for the region to maintain financial sustainability and properly manage this growth will require strong phasing policies in both the region and local municipal official plans. And a phasing strategy ensures community development is aligned with planned infrastructure delivery and actual growth. And it also ensures that as new communities are built, they will be supported by growth in services such as schools, libraries, community facilities, and community centers. And more discussions are required with local municipal staff across the region, and a more detailed approach and direction for phasing policies will be outlined in a third policy directions report that staff are bringing forward to Regional Council in June 2021. And possible approaches include a local municipal policy-driven approach or a more regional focused approach, identifying phases for urban expansion areas in the regional official plan, or a hybrid of the two approaches could be used. So this slide provides some examples of criteria that staff are considering for phasing policies under the two approaches. And these phasing policies, they are more relevant to municipalities with urban expansion land. So I won't spend any time on this slide other than to reiterate that more direction on phasing and options will be provided to Regional Council in June of this year. So that concludes the presentation material. And for next steps in the region's MCR work, the forecasts and the proposed urban expansion, that were presented to you today, they are for consultation. And over the coming months, regional staff will continue to consult with local municipal staff, as well as local councils, as well as the public and the development industry. As I mentioned, this will lead to a draft regional official plan later on in the fall. There will also be additional social media interaction with the public. And as a third policy directions report is scheduled for June, that will provide the additional direction on phasing. And all of this forecast and land needs work will lead to updates to the region's transportation master plan, the water and wastewater master plan, and ultimately leading to a development charge bylaw update throughout 2021 and 2022. And with that, Mr. Mayor, my presentation concludes, and I'd be happy to take some comments or any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mr. Freeman, as well. So council, I know we have the recommendation in front of us has two. One is also to endorse. I'm going to recommend that we just receive this at this time, because I know that there's some concerns in regards to the growth forecast, and I know that this is just we're still in consultation, and we'll be able to work at it. And I just want to get that maybe from Mr. Freeman. Mr. Freeman, we don't need to endorse that number tonight, do we?
Through you, Mr. Mayor Maracus, no, you don't. We're in the middle of consultation, as Paul has identified. And Paul, I'll ask you to just take the screen down, maybe, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So, as Paul said, and first of all, apologies for the fire hose of information that we've provided to you. There's a great deal of information, as you can imagine, to plan for 30 years of growth and to make sure that all of that is done in a coordinated way across 9 local municipalities. And as you can tell, growth management and fiscal sustainability is of prime importance to what we're looking at. But these are proposed forecasts at this point in time. There's still more consultation to take place, and we'd be happy if the committee was to receive this, and then we'll, as Paul said, we'll continue to work with your staff to finalize numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. So, council, if I can just get a motion to receive at this time, Councilor Gardner, Councilor Thompson. So, any comments or questions to Mr. Freeman, Mr. Bottomley, or to the report itself? Councilor Thompson first.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the presentation and all the subsequent information that we have before us. I do want to touch upon that number in terms of how the calculation was done. We had some conversation at our public planning meeting. And so in reading in our reports, and you touched upon it in the presentation as well, I came across on the information about the forecast for local municipalities, and it talked about the share of York Region growth that each municipality is having as an overall number. And for Aurora, that share is 3%, as is East Gwillimbury, Georgina, Georgina King, and Newmarket. And in your presentation, you talked about it in the past, it was 5%. Now the proposal is 3%. I was wondering if you can kind of go into a little bit more detail about how that 3% is determined, because on first glance, looking at the chart, it just seems interesting that both Georgina King, Newmarket, and Aurora all are pegged at the same 3% number. I don't know if that's intentional or that's just how the calculation sort of worked out. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to whoever's the appropriate delegate to speak to it.
Mr. Bottomley?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Very good question. I think the 3% actually is just a coincidence in many respects for all of those municipalities. But generally, what we look at here is obviously what's on the books in Aurora. So we know what's being planned today, throughout communities in Aurora. So we're building out what's being planned in Aurora 2C, for example, in Aurora South. We also look at on the intensification side, what the town envisions in the promenade area and in the area along the Aurora Go major transit station area. Those are the key intensification markets for the town. And it is a bit tricky in terms of forecasting intensification for Aurora in the broader regional market. Obviously, the southern municipalities are going to attract the lion's share of that growth. And over the long term, intensification will play a more prominent role in the town's growth, as I mentioned, as the greenfield land supply diminishes. So it really does come down to, how much intensification can Aurora absorb relative to intensification throughout the rest of the region. What's the market for intensification in Aurora? I know the town's done some further detailed work on the growth management side of things over the last few months. And the numbers that we've presented are probably on the more conservative side for intensification relative to what the promenade could accommodate over the long term. But you have to keep in mind that these are minimum intensification targets, so just minimum figures. And of course, we do regular reviews of this material every 5 years or every 10 years at the maximum, just to take stock to see where we're at in terms of monitoring the growth. And I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. And, I'm sure that there'll be more questions about it as we go along through this process. Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Paul, with regards to, the concept that these are just proposed numbers and there's still lots of consultation to go on, is the overall growth for York Region, the 876,000 people, still a number under debate? Or is it really just how that share is broken up amongst the 9 municipalities that's really part of the consultation?
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Mayor, good question. That number comes from the growth plan. And as you know, the growth plan is a provincial document. So we are mandated to conform to the growth plan. So we can't change that number. I mean, we do have an option to consider that number as a minimum forecast, but the province has given us that leeway. But it's a very aggressive figure to begin with, that 800,000 plus people over the next 30 years. So we think that, we shouldn't be planning beyond that 2.02 million. And it really is just a matter of distributing that growth to the 9 municipalities. Yeah.
Councillor?
Thank you. Thank you. And then the last one really is just a comment. I noticed in one of your slides, you said that $11.6 million worth of infrastructure is needed to accommodate all this growth by 2051. I certainly hope part of that number is the interchange at St. John's and the 404, and perhaps it's coming sooner than 2051, closer to today than 2051. But just a comment. I know the mayor continues to advocate for that at the York Region. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, we have Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few questions. When you're speaking about bus transit growth, you're talking about only rapid transit?
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
No, sorry, you go.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the figures that I presented in the presentation was strictly bus rapid transit. But I mean, having said that, obviously we are planning for York Region Transit in addition to those bus rapid transit facilities, and that 11.6 billion would include that bus or the regular bus service throughout the region.
Councillor?
Thank you. I'm pretty aware of what's happening with buses within the town and even outside of the peak periods, and they're not being used. They're riding empty. The Viva's riding empty, and certainly the York Region Transit is almost always empty within the town. So I just it's a comment. I'm sure the region is aware of it, but we have these huge buses going down Yonge Street that are certainly appropriate for the busiest periods, the peak periods, but the rest of the time we still have these huge buses using a lot of fuel, making a lot of noise, and they're pretty empty. So I don't know if you want to comment, or certainly would you take my comment back, because it just doesn't make sense.
Bottomley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, once again, yeah, I'm obviously not actively involved in the transportation aspect of planning throughout the region. We do, of course, have a very experienced transportation department that are updating the transportation master plan for the region. My understanding is that ridership has increased year over year, going back 10, 15 years. So obviously that's looking at the system collectively throughout the region and the southern part as well as the northern part. I don't have any detailed figures with respect to ridership in northern New York region, so Newmarket and Aurora.
Thank you. And is that maybe why they're, using the big buses coming out of Newmarket? We may not have a lot of people, but maybe they're picking up in the southern areas. But certainly our internal York Region Transit rides empty all the time. So if you can pass that on, if not, I'll pass it on myself. Could you put up the slide with the white belt area, the East Gwillimbury one?
Certainly.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I may, maybe while Paul is pulling that up, I'll just respond to the comment about buses, and I don't disagree, and we'll certainly take that back, Councillor. But we're in early stages of a maturing region, and putting in the bus rapid transit Aviva that we did, that council has committed to over the last 10 years, and now with more of it being constructed on Yonge Street, I think it's early days with respect to growing our intensification and our city building movement to get more ridership. The bottom line is COVID has put a real dampening on that with the impact of the pandemic. But we take your point, and we'll take that back to members of our team.
Thank you. And my comments are for the pre-COVID time.
Yep.
Thank you. So I can't tell here with the white belt, East Gwillimbury.
Sorry, let me just increase that for you. Sorry. Okay.
Oops.
Whoops. Sorry, I lost the page there. Hang on. There we are. Sorry.
Okay, so north of Newmarket. Where's Yonge Street here? Oh, there's Yonge Street. Okay.
It's right here, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Does that include Holland Landing, by the way?
Yes, Holland Landing is this area here. Yeah.
But it's not a white belt area?
No, Holland Landing is an existing community.
Thank you.
There are, oh, geez, I moved that again. It's very sensitive. Sorry. Yeah, there are pockets of white belt that you can see here between Holland Landing, Queensville, and Sharon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So my question is with respect to the GO station, the GO stations, GO parking. What is being planned? Because as you know, our GO parking in Aurora is very difficult. Something is planned, I believe. Well, there's something planned for Newmarket. What is in the works for all of this so that Aurora is not going to be infringed with respect to parking?
Mr. Bottomley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'll do my best to answer that question. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not sort of actively plugged into the transportation planning side of things, but certainly there's the East Gwillimbury GO station that's being planned on Green Lane. And my understanding, certainly there will be fairly extensive parking area in that location. Of course, we've also got on Bloomington Road out by the 404, that parking facility that's close to completion or may in fact be completed. So those are the two sort of larger scale parking areas that I'm aware of that are being planned. Otherwise, I'd have to take that question back to regional transportation staff.
Okay, I just want to make sure that our situation isn't made worse by intensification north of us. I mean, we'll have enough problems with the intensification we have in Aurora. Also, with respect to consultation, as you said, this is mandated by the province. So what kind of consultation are you expecting, and what kind of consultation could even make a difference to the plans?
Mr. Bottomley?
Just take this slide back off. Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we are doing a fairly extensive piece of work on the social media side. Obviously, we're in a different environment these days in this virtual environment, but certainly, as I meant, this is one of a number of sessions with all 9 or with the local municipality councils. We're meeting, have been meeting very regularly with local staff throughout our whole process. So that obviously will continue as we finalize these figures. Social media platform with the public, obviously the industry is also part of that, is what we're planning. It's still early days and sort of ironing out the details of how we're going to do that, but certainly there's going to be a webinar that we're planning for as part of that process. And I think it may provide us also with an opportunity to piggyback on some of the local municipal consultation and work that's being done. So, that's something that is also being planned. But in terms of how we change the figures, certainly there's an opportunity to adjust these figures. That's why we are consulting. They're not final, as mentioned, and that's why we're coming out to get feedback from yourselves and others.
Councillor?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gallo, next.
Thank you. And I would agree, there's a lot of information to absorb between last week and this week, some, 800, 900 pages. So I'm going to go relatively high level because I'll be honest, I'm still going through it and trying to wrap my head around it and quite frankly, understand it. On a few occasions, it's mentioned in our report as well as your 2051 forecast and land needs assessment, the Upper York sewage solution. Could you go through again the impact that delay would have on Aurora, numbers in terms of allocation, the delay in allocation that we had anticipated and had planned for, and how that trickles down to not being able to develop because the allocation might be not what we had expected.
Mr. Freeman, did you want to tackle this one?
Yeah, sure. Mayor Marakis, I'm happy to weigh in on this, and I think members of committee are well aware of the issues of the delays in Upper York, and we are quite concerned about it as well. I think, Paul, you can talk a little bit about the phasing and the way that the growth has been allocated. And I think on this map that you see on the screen, the fact that even though East Gwillimbury has asked for all of the remaining white belts to be included for urban expansion, the fact is they can't all be serviced within the timelines of the 30 years for even if Upper York is no further delays and brought on stream by 2028. There are phases to it. So we have accounted for that, and I'll let Paul speak a little bit more to that. But, Aurora is relatively little growth compared to the other municipalities. And Paul's work has accounted for timing, I think, right now of the earliest of 2028. Then there's several phases of expansion of the water reclamation center that would take place over time by the time we get to 2051. And so, we're watching that daily with respect to, an overdue announcement on the EA approval by the province. And we'll continue to monitor that, Councillor. Paul's forecast has accounted for what we know today, and we'll continue to monitor that and plan for the growth, even though the timing of the infrastructure may come a little bit later. Paul, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that.
Certainly. The Upper York is, as mentioned, 2028 is what we're anticipating at this point. Once the facility is in operation, say it happens in 2028, that will provide capacity for about 90,000 people in East Gwillimbury, and some of that 90,000 is also providing capacity for a section of Northwest Newmarket. It also does free up capacity of roughly 30,000 people that will be transferred to Newmarket and Aurora. So Aurora will get a piece or share of that 30,000 people once the Upper York facility is in operation, say 2028 or thereabouts. It's a multiple expansion phase facility, the Upper York Servicing Solution. So the first phase, as I mentioned, provides 90,000 people. The second phase will get them to roughly 135,000 people. And we're expecting phase 2 will probably not happen until the early 2040s. There has to be some monitoring done as part of phase 1 with respect to phosphorus loading into Lake Simcoe, and then beyond phase 2, there might also be an option or a requirement rather for a phase 3 to get them to that sort of long-range population target of 150,000 people, and that will certainly not happen probably until post 2051.
Councillor?
Thank you. I'm just, and I appreciate that. I'm trying to just reassure myself that these numbers are, some thought has been put towards our current allocations and the impact of the delay of the Upper York sewage solution. And I don't know, maybe it's to staff as opposed to the delegates, to give me some assurances that our current allocations and delays, as well as new developments that are on the horizon, are being captured, because all of that would affect these numbers. You know, we can put the 80,000 people by 2051, but if we don't have capacity, and probably I'm more concerned about the short term rather than the long term, and unless something really goes off the tracks. I'm trying to get assurances that someone has looked in detail our current capacity, taking into account the delay, as well as in the pipeline developments that are coming.
Mr. Freeman?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we have looked at this in detail, and I can tell you specifically that Aurora gets about 10,000 people share of capacity in the first phase of Upper York. The second and third phases doesn't really do too much for Aurora. It's more for East Gwillimbury and Newmarket, but I know our staff are working in environmental services along the way with us very closely as part of the water wastewater master plan update, as well as the transportation master plan, but specifically on this one with water wastewater. So there is a capacity of 10,000 people in the first phase of the water reclamation center.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. And I mean, I won't prolong this, but and that's in 2028, hopefully. I'm more concerned about the short term. I don't think we got any allocation in 2019. And I don't know whether we've captured everything. And maybe it's a question for Mr. Waters as well. And I see him, and I'm happy to hear.
Mr. Waters, I believe you mentioned that number before, so go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Gallup, we've got about a 4 to 5 year supply of allocation for residential development. That's ready for us to use. After that, we depend on the Upper York system to basically be operational for us to free up additional capacity.
Councillor?
Yeah, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Waters, does that include any of the developments that are in the pipeline that we haven't really accounted for yet?
Mr. Waters?
Hill, Magna.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the units that we have in the system are those that have proposals for or have development rights.
I guess the answer is no. Okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor, there was just I didn't know if what I heard or if I misunderstood in terms of the employment types. There was some service type jobs, but there was also, and I may have gotten this wrong, but employment area jobs was the primary one. Did I get that wrong? Or I'm not sure what that means.
Mr. Bottomley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, you got that right. The employment area jobs. So they're anticipated to attract the largest share of the town's growth at 54%. And then population-related jobs at 31%, major office at roughly 14%. So a lot of those employment land jobs are in the Aurora, 2C area, north of, east of Leslie, I guess, north of the current sort of smart center area.
And through you, sir, what type of jobs are they? Is that what we're identifying by saying employment area jobs, or just the geographic or the employment areas?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it is a geographic term that we use, so it would include all jobs located in employment areas. So it could be industrial, business park, office, as well as a small scale retail that serves businesses.
Councillor?
And just the last question in terms of we're using 55 people and jobs per hectare because that's typically what we've had for the last little while in 2B and 2C. Yet the region, I think, on average is 50. Are we stuck on that number? Is that just simply because of that's what's historically in Aurora in the last 10 or 15 years?
Good question. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that number, once again, it's a minimum target. So we have to be cognizant of that. And yeah, as I mentioned, we looked at some samples throughout the region. I think Aurora 2B and 2C were in that range, 55, 56 people in jobs per hectare. And it also is based on what's being planned elsewhere today. So whatever's out there in the pipeline in terms of applications, we would have looked at that as well in calculating that number. But it doesn't preclude you or the town from looking at higher densities. So in certain locations, that doesn't preclude anything. It's simply a minimum target that is there to push for, and it's tied to providing transit supportive communities. That's sort of the basis behind it. The region number is higher than 55, just to remind you. In our new communities, we're aiming for, in our expansion new communities in the White Belt, for 60 people and jobs per hectare. That's what we're aiming for in the land budget. So it's a little bit lower than that number.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, did I hear incorrectly that the average in this plan is 50?
The average, so that's a growth plan minimum target, is the 50. So we're planning beyond 50 because our overall average, we did some work that we presented to Regional Council looking at about a dozen communities throughout the region today, and what the average density is today in those communities. So it's a sample of what the market's currently delivering, and that number was 62 people and jobs per hectare. So we're in our planning work for our new communities, we're using that 60 figure, in that range of 60 people and jobs per hectare.
Councillor?
Thank you. And last week I spoke about just questioning whether at some point we do a little more analysis and thought, and let's say council, doesn't agree with the numbers. What would be the steps to take place in terms of, let's say we want more, but let's say we wanted less?
Mr. Bottomley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, certainly. We're requesting if we can get some feedback from local councils, that would be fantastic. I think we had put forward a July 15th date that we would like to see some formal feedback from each local municipality. But we're certainly open to receiving feedback from staff, and we're going to meet with your own staff over the coming weeks to get their input as well. So, and that's all part of the process.
Councillor?
Thank you. And just the last thing, Mr. Mayor, I'll let other people speak. I'd like to see what they have to say, but I'd like to continue this discussion, at least from our perspective, staff, and hope we'll have some other opportunities to provide input and do a proper job in terms of a Maiden Aurora solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland, next.
Thank you. Sorry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess to Paul. My questions were also about the Upper York. Thank you, Councillor Gallo, for covering a lot of that. So I guess just to kind of do a follow-up couple questions on that. From what I'm gathering, since we're only guaranteed to have 10,000 growth based on that 90,000 allocation by an estimated 2026, from what I'm reading based on the chart, the majority of our growth would have to occur post 2041, more than 50% based on the allocation.
Mr.
Is
Freeman
that correct?
or Mr. Bottomley?
Through Mr. Mayor, yeah, I just have to think about that one for a second. Obviously, you've got current allocation that your director indicated will give you enough for maybe 4 to 5 years growth. And we're waiting for that Upper York to get facility to get built. We're providing another 10,000 people that's being transferred to Aurora. But there's certainly an opportunity for additional growth beyond that via the YDSS, is my understanding. So I obviously don't know the details behind that, and would have to sort of touch base with our water and wastewater folk to get some, you're getting into quite a bit of detail on that question. I'd have to talk to our regional folk on that.
Mr. Freeman, do you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're happy to follow up with your staff as well, but I think we calculate a little bit longer than the 4 to 5 years. We track it based on a methodology of registrations. So it may be a little bit longer, but we will certainly do that follow-up with Mr. Waters. I'll just add a couple other points too. The interim solution projects are nearing completion. That's the Newmarket Twinning, Aurora Pumping Station, Henderson Pumping Station, and those are expected to be finished by 2023. But we're happy to dig into this a little bit deeper. Unfortunately, our engineering staff are not on the call with us. I know they're following along and they're looking at this very closely with respect to the water wastewater master plan. So we're happy to take that feedback and continue to work with Mr. Waters.
Councillor?
Thank you. I really appreciate it, because as we talk about all this expected growth, it seems like we're barely meeting the target after 2041 based on assumptions, followed by an unknown phase. So maybe those growth targets are really unrealistic. That's just a comment that I have. There was some conversation within the presentation, and correct me if I heard you wrong, but did you say that Aurora would be expected to get 22 apartment buildings?
Mr. Bottomley?
You're on mute, Paul.
You're on mute, Paul.
Through Mr. Mayor, no, the apartment forecasts, I believe 43% of your total unit growth is anticipated to be apartments. I don't have the total unit growth in front of me. I think it's around 10,000 or so.
Councillor?
Thank you. And as a follow-up, is that based on our current official plan zoning bylaws as far as height, or is just a model that you just kind of take an average height as far as, density intensification?
Through Mr. Mayor, no, that it's based on, obviously we've consulted with your own staff as part of this process, and we've shared our figures with town staff. So it's looking at what's being planned in the promenade area in terms of intensification, what's being planned within the Aurora GO station area, which is part of the promenade area. But it's also looked at, the Highland Gate proposal, for example, what's being built in Aurora South. So there is some ground truthing to those figures. And of course, there's also the Aurora 2A project that will probably get built over the long term as well.
Councillor?
Thank you. And just a quick question, maybe I missed the chart or map. I noticed the map was very specific to most municipalities, but Aurora and Newmarket seem to all be kind of put together. Is there any kind of graphic that will be shown or presented to the council to kind of show us exactly where those intensified areas we should expect in Aurora, at least for the public to see? Like, I understand it'll be in the 2C and the major transit area. And I think you had mentioned, I thought you said like Henderson. I don't know what you had said, but is there some sort of map that will really dial in on where we will see this expected growth?
Mr. Bottomley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think your question was it maybe just beyond the intensification side of things? As I mentioned, certainly intensification, the promenade area is key there. I think there's the Highland Gate Golf Course development that I was talking about. That actually does count as intensification, even though it includes primarily single detached units. So the way we calculate intensification, it could be any unit type. So it can be a single detached, a semi-detached, a row house, or an apartment, if it all falls within the existing built-up area. And that built-up area is a defined land area that the province calculated for the region back in 2006. But certainly, there's probably some work that we can do on the mapping side that we can talk to your staff about and produce something for you to see.
Mr. Freeman, you looked like you wanted to add something, so that's fine.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The mapping we provided really does focus on the white belt areas for those municipalities that do have that, and a bulk of this presentation is about that urban expansion for those municipalities. Aurora's growth is through intensification, and it really, those areas would be determined mostly through your official plan. And many of those areas are already identified, like the Aurora Promenade, in your existing plan. We did do some work previously on major transit station areas, the Aurora, again, the GO station area, but we'd be happy to, as we work with your staff to look at the mapping, we're happy to work on that.
Councillor?
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kim, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Bottomley and Mr. Freeman for coming. I just have one question, and when you have a roadmap that goes out 20, 30 years, there's a lot of dependencies, and one of them is finances, and in following the region's finances at a high level, my question is, a lot of the tier 1 municipalities have been hampered by revenue generation, and because of COVID, certainly, development charges, which are predicated on growth, is one source of revenue that's been significantly less than pre-COVID. So how has, whether it be from, revenues from DCs or other revenues in the region, how has that impacted the growth management roadmap, and what are the major dependencies that you see that need to be in place in order for this roadmap to be successful?
Mr. Bottomley?
Mr. Mayor, not an easy question to answer, but certainly that was one of the themes of this presentation, did touch on financial sustainability. It is certainly a key subject for the region. When we do this growth management work, we don't work in isolation. So all of this land use planning work that has been brought forward is being coordinated very extensively with our master plans for transportation, for water and wastewater, as well as our finance folks. So they're actively involved in this process, and they're looking at the fiscal impact side of things all the way out to 2051. But certainly we do have a fiscal strategy in place at the region. I mentioned that very quickly in the presentation. It's something that we do update on an annual basis. So we sort of we take stock of where we are with respect to where the debt is, where, how much we're receiving in development charge collections. And, if it comes down to it, we are experiencing a lower rate of growth the last few years. So we have been growing slower than anticipated. So that results in less development charge collections the last few years. But we think we look at this in terms of the region being a very positive environment, positive, attractive place for both businesses and people that want to move here. So over the long term, we think that this forecast is achievable, but we're certainly going to monitor this growth on an annual basis. And, if the debt, if we can't pay down the debt, then obviously we're going to have to make some tough decisions with respect to, what do we invest in for new infrastructure, and when does that investment take place? And it may, there may have to be some deferrals as a result. And I think that's why that phasing, there was some material on phasing in the presentation also, and phasing of our new urban expansion areas will be a key part of how we manage growth moving forward. And a lot of that will be linked to our fiscal situation.
Councillor?
Great, thank you. And I know that's a tough question, and it's not just one quick answer to that. And I asked that question in light of the fact that a lot of the growth targets for Aurora is predicated on infrastructure projects, being on time and being on budgeted forecast. And so, if we have a fiscal issue, then, certainly the targets for Aurora might change as well. So that's the context in which I ask. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gartner, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could you tell me where the Aurora 2A project is?
3, Mr. Mayor, unless I'm wrong here, but I believe it is the area just south of the Magna Lands on the east side of Bayview Avenue, south of Wellington.
Councillor?
I didn't know it had a name. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
When I'm looking at your presentation, one of the things we're looking for with respect to employment is knowledge-based, transportation, and warehousing. So my question goes to warehousing. Warehousing is generally 1 story high, maybe accompanied, as it is with Bulk Barn, by a corporate office. But with that 1 story, I mean, we could have a lot more built on top of that 1 story. The warehouses are usually very large. So I don't know if that's been taken into consideration as on top of warehousing as an intensification area, so to speak.
Mr. Bottomley?
3, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, what in the presentation, what I was getting at there was we have done a fair amount of work on employment trends. So trying to predict the future on the job side of things. And it is a bit of a tricky business, but we've looked at automation potential by sector. And the end result of all that work was we anticipate continued rapid growth in knowledge-based sectors, strong growth in the transportation and warehousing sectors, modest growth in manufacturing, and a decline in retail. Those are sort of the trends that we're seeing today that we think will continue on. Transportation, warehousing, obviously there's huge strengths in the city of Vaughan in those areas. Warehousing, certainly, I think over the long term, the other thing we do look at is intensification in employment areas. So we have done some work on that end as well. And that could be an expansion of an existing business, for example, within the existing parcel. That would be counted as intensification, or it could be something that's built on top of an existing structure. So we do make some assumptions on that side as part of our land use work for employment. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And that makes sense, because that would be a wasted use of space if we didn't consider that area on top of warehouses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson, second time.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Waters. Mr. Waters, Mr. Bottomley mentioned the date of July 15th is looking for feedback from various municipalities, I guess, on numbers or any concerns. Is it your plan then, Mr. Waters, to bring, I guess, a report to council prior to that, listing staff's concerns and or any concerns by council for approval and endorsement before submitting it to the region, or how is that process going to work?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, based on what I've heard at tonight's meeting and also last week's public planning, seems council doesn't have the level of comfort yet on the proposed growth forecast that the region has put forth. So what we'll probably end up doing is having our consultant SGL review the region's work and compare it to the work that was in the growth management discussion paper and bring forward a report that essentially peer reviews what the region has done in terms of the growth forecasts, and to confirm whether those are appropriate forecasts or whether our different numbers should be adopted by council moving forward.
Councillor? Oh, you're on mute, Councillor.
Thank you. I think all members of council would like to continue this discussion once we get that additional information. So I look forward to seeing the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gallo, second time.
That was my exact concern and question as well. So I'm happy to see it's going to come back and provide some input. I would urge staff, or at least maybe I can do it offline, but just to better understand allocation, current situation, the impact of the York, and as well as current developments that are not on the books yet, but are certainly happening, and some in different degrees of stages than others, just to get a fulsome picture of that.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? So none. Mr. Freeman, I have one, and I think you know where I'm going to go with this one. With all the projections, and we know how council feels and our comfort level with the number, and we would like to see it reduced. But let's say that was the number. That number as a minimum target, the growth plan, meeting the growth plan, meeting the provincial policy, our 50% intensification, 55 people and jobs per hectare. Can we meet all of those objectives in the town of Aurora and yet still keep the uniqueness of us and maintaining our height restrictions, maintaining our density within OPA 34? Can we continue to be that unique and have those restrictions in place and yet meet those targets?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The short answer is yes, I believe you can. You know, this is fundamental. The province is planning for 30 years of growth across the greater Toronto Hamilton area, and they've done forecasting and allocating forecasts to each region over 30 years. It's very hard to predict exactly what those forecasts are going to be. And someone once said to me, every forecast is wrong. You know, we do our best to plan for that, and a number of the targets are across the region as a whole, but each of our local municipalities are unique. And I'm a big advocate and firm believer that local official plans should determine the look and feel of what they would like to, what your community would like to see, you know, in the future in terms of where growth occurs, intensification, the type of intensification, you know, any intensification happens in many forms. You know, even a second suite in a home is intensification, and so is a 40-story building or 60 stories in some places. We're seeing along you know, subway corridors in our region. So the look and feel in working with our forecasts and our direction needs to occur hand in hand with your official plan together with the region official plan. So the answer is yes.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. And I remember specifically, we were at the region. This was actually a while ago. This was pre-COVID, and we sat down and we had actually Mr. Joe Barrage come in and present to us his book in regards to the perfect city. And I remember specifically asking him that because all the conversation was around the perfect city, the perfect region. And I asked specifically, can a perfect town exist within the confines of a perfect region, a perfect city? And he said, absolutely. Just as when you look at New York City and there's like little hamlets within there. Similarly, we can be, as the town of Aurora, a small hamlet of the region of York, where we have a uniqueness. And as Mr. Bottomley mentioned, there is a special attraction to York region for people to come in here and move here or open their business here. And I think Aurora offers that in a very unique way. And I'm glad that you mentioned that ROP is something that we need to basically drill down and get right as far as to make our town unique within the vision of what we want to see moving forward within the confines of the provincial policy and the growth plan and be able to meet those targets. So I appreciate you coming. Actually, and just one more thing. I just wanted to make sure, because you did kind of touch on it there for a second, just so everyone has a full understanding. Intensification, if we go from 0 to 1 unit, that is considered intensification by definition, correct?
It can be, yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So I appreciate you guys coming this evening. If there's no other comments or questions, I will ask for a vote. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Mr. Bottomley, Mr. Freeman, thank you very much for taking the time to come out here.
Thank you.
Actually, I'll see you guys on Thursday. So
Yeah. Thank you.
have a good night.
Yeah.
Council, we're still at 8:30, so we have time. I'm going to ask us to move to 8.5 and 8.6, just because we had the delegates that were here in front of us. So I'll start with 8.5, which is application for site plan approval, 1623 Wellington Street Developments Limited. The recommendation is that report number PDS 21-056 be received. 2, that site plan application file SP 2021-03 to permit the development of a motor vehicle sales establishment be approved in principle, subject to the following conditions. 1, that all outstanding comments and requirements from town and external agencies be addressed to satisfaction of the Director of Planning and Development Services prior to the execution of a site plan agreement. And 2, that the owners enter into a site plan agreement with the town to address requirements of the town and external agencies, including but not limited to the provisions for payment by the owner of all applicable fees, securities, and any other financial obligations. Would someone like to move that recommendation? Nobody? Councillor Kemp? Anyone else? Seconder? Councillor Gilliland? Thank you. Any comments or questions? Call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Move to 8.6. PDS 21-052, application for site plan approval, Aurora Self-Storage, Inc., and 1623 Wellington Street Developments Limited. The recommendation is 1, that report number PDS 21-052 be received. 2, that site plan application file SP 2021-04 to permit the development of a commercial self-storage facility be approved in principle, subject to the following conditions. 1, that all outstanding comments and requirements from the town and external agencies be addressed to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and Development Services prior to the execution of a site plan agreement. And 2, that the owners enter into a site plan agreement with the town to address requirements of the town and external agencies, including but not limited to the provision for payment by the owner of all applicable fees, securities, and any other financial obligations. Would someone like to move this recommendation? Councillor Humphreys, second. Have a seconder? Councillor Gilliland, thank you. Any comments or questions on this item? Call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. All right, council, moving along. We'll move to back to 8.2, modernized noise bylaw. The recommendation that report number CS 21-017 be received, and 2, that the proposed noise bylaw be brought forward to a future council meeting for enactment, repealing and replacing the current noise bylaw number 4787-06P. Someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Gilliland, Councillor Kim, second. Any comments or questions on this item? Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Van Leeuwen or Mr. Ray. I was curious about some of the charting. You had some questions to the general public, I gather. And one of them was, which type of noise concern do you frequently experience? So it was really, I guess I was shocked to hear that 44% was domestic. Do you have a definition of what domestic would fall under, or what that would mean?
Mr. Ray?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the domestic type noise would be general noises from home, children yelling, playing. It could be lawnmower type use, leaf blowers, general domestic type noise.
Councillor?
Thank you. So I was just really shocked just learning kind of those responses. Dogs barking being, I guess, second, and then the construction being 16. And then I go over to a couple pages over, questions 7 and 8, and they're almost kind of like they want their cake and eat it too. It's kind of contrary to one another. So that question being, should the town consider a noise exemption for special events? And it's like, and the majority said yes, for weddings, parades, birthday parties, people, I guess, consider domestic noise, but yet it's one of the things that they find is the most, I guess, cumbersome to have to deal with. So just kind of contradictory to what people had said. And I found the same thing with construction. 67% said, no, there should not be an exemptions for construction, but yet it fell third on the list as being an annoyance. So I'm just curious, like, how do you find that balance?
Mr. Ray?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Finding the balance in noise bylaw legislations can be very challenging because there's no one-size-fits-all solution. So it's trying to take the needs of all of our communities, our business communities, our residential neighborhoods, our industry, and understanding kind of what applies to them, and creating general prohibitions or restrictions, but also ensuring the fairness of the legislation. It's challenging to do, but I do believe that this proposed bylaw will hit those points.
Ms. Van Leeuwen, did you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. So we have included a general prohibition that states no person shall make, cause, or permit noise at any time that is unreasonable and persistent noise that is audible at the point of reception. And this was comments that we received from the prosecutor, and we have defined those specific terms so that it is fair and reasonable to all our residents. So it has to be unreasonable noise and persistent. And he used the example of somebody ringing a doorbell more than once. That's could be seen as persistent, but that's reasonable if they just ring it twice. So we did make a few changes based on our prosecutor's final review, and that's where the balance comes into play through that prohibition.
Councillor?
Great. That's kind of what I was looking for, because I can only imagine what you have to kind of assess and trying to understand what would be considered, I guess, a noise disturbance, because it's subjective. So at least you have a little bit more grit to it by that persistenceness. But definitely you can see by the charting, some of it is kind of contradictory to what people may define as annoying and not annoying. So I'm glad there's some definition there. Just curious as to your 3 main focus points of what you're trying to capture. It didn't seem to include industrial noise. Is there a reason for that?
Mr. Ray?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So industrial noise is addressed through the Ministry of Environment. The MOE, Ministry of Environment, has standards and noise certificates that are issued to industrial occupancy type businesses. So they fall outside of the scope of our bylaw because their noise statuses and the emissions of those noise are regulated at a provincial level.
Councillor?
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm that was the process, so people understand. But they can definitely come to us for support and guidance, and we could also assist in, I guess, opening a file with the Ministry of Environment to assess the situation. Correct?
Ms. Ray?
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's correct.
Councillor?
Perfect. I had another question, but I'll wait. I'll let some other councillors go around and ask some questions. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, to start with, I know that staff is trying to get feedback from residents and businesses and then balance requirements and what people want and need. But I really don't think that we could say we've appropriately consulted the public. With respect to the online, there were 516 views, 76 participants, and 31 comments. To me, and I think that other councillors agree with this, we can't call this appropriate public consultation. And then if we're taking percentages of the 31 comments and we're saying, 50% are happy with it or 50% want to change it, that's really not valid information, in my opinion, to form a bylaw. I'd also like to say, I think if you did a survey of people who lived in areas that are quiet, areas that are farther away from Yonge Street, Henderson, St. John's, Bayview, in the future, perhaps Leslie, we'll have two different populations to serve. One population is the population that already has peace and quiet because they're farther removed from those main transportation corridors. The other group of people is the people that are extremely affected by the noise that happens with deliveries and garbage pickup and everything else that generates noise. And I think we need to do a much wider consultation. Maybe it has to be surveys targeted to certain areas because the noise bylaw, yes, we're talking about homeowners and their expectations generally, but with respect to what I would call real, steady, everyday, during the day, during the night noise, we've got a whole different quality of life of residents for residents to look at. With respect to homeowners being able to do exterior work on their properties, I'd like a little more information on that, because if we're looking at things that are generating noise, one of the things that people are going to be allowed to do is paint. I don't think that generates a lot of noise. So I would like to have a more fulsome idea of what we are going to be allowing people to do on a Sunday between 9 and 5. In my opinion, there has to be at least one day with some hours in the day where residents know that they are not going to be disturbed by outside noise from their neighbors. They may want to have a family function. They may want to be outside, enjoy some peace and quiet. To allow every day of the week to have noise, it's not acceptable to me if we're speaking of quality of life. But I would like to know what, what are we talking about with respect to Sunday noise?
Ms. Ray,
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think I'm going to let Director Van Leeuwen answer that.
Ms. Van Leeuwen,
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we have included in the bylaw definition of residential renovation that would permit a property owner to do renovations on their own property, or the tenant and or occupant to do renovations on a Sunday, subject to the provisions that are outlined in, there's one section that deals with residential renovation. So that would permit an individual who owns a property to build a deck on a Sunday.
Councillor,
A lot of property owners do their own renovations.
Councillor,
Thank you. And there will be a difference of opinion on this with respect to counselors, because I mean, we're all busy and Sunday is generally a day that we are home. But I still think that there should be a portion of Sunday where our residents can expect that there won't be any outdoor construction noise. Thank you, Ms. Van Leeuwen.
Well, sorry, if I
Ms.
could just add through you,
Ms.
Mr.
Van Leeuwen?
Mayor. Yes. So they're not permitted to start before 9 a.m. on a Sunday and not permitted to go beyond 5 p.m. So it's 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. that they'd be permitted to construct a deck or a patio or do some landscaping or something like that.
Yeah, I read it. To me, you know, people like to have peace and quiet in the afternoons too. With respect to one of the charts, no, how much time do I have left, Mr. Mayor?
Madam Deputy Clerk?
Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You have 6 minutes.
Okay. As Ms. Van Leeuwen knows, as Mr. Ray knows, I am a resident that lives in a busy area close to Yonge Street. And I am very bothered by deliveries that take place all through the night and garbage disposal that's picked up at 3 a.m. I am not clear, and I thank you, Ms. Van Leeuwen, for emailing me. I did have a follow-up, and it was past 4:30 that I sent it. Can you clarify with respect to the emergency noise provisions that were, or regulations that were put in place? With respect to delivery of goods and services and pickup of garbage, was that 7 at night to the 11 at night to the 7 in the morning? Was that a time when we were still allowed to enforce our noise bylaw?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So there was a regulation put in place for COVID, and it's a temporary regulation that prohibits the municipality from regulating the delivery of goods. It expires in September of 2021. However, a permanent amendment to the Municipal Act has received royal assent that prohibits us from regulating delivery of certain goods to various businesses. It has not yet been proclaimed, so it's not yet in full force, but it has received royal assent. And I'm not sure if Patricia wants to add any comments.
Ms. Desario, did you want to add anything to the bill that received royal assent?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The only thing I did want to add was that there's no time periods attached to it. So we can't regulate it. It's a clear prohibition, and there's no opportunity for the municipality to regulate it at any hour.
Thank you. Councillor?
So thank you. With respect to the prohibition that was put in place, the COVID prohibition for the 18 months, I think I see from your emails that was with respect to construction noise, but you're also saying it was with respect to delivery of goods and services. And now, nowhere in here does it, I'm not sure, let me start this differently. With respect to garbage pickup, I think that is also exempt from when that can be done
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
in the new amendment, that's pending.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe waste collection is included in that amendment to the Municipal Act.
Council?
Okay. I have a notice, an exception does not apply to waste collection. 2.511 to 5 a.m. So perhaps I could have clarification on that. I think many of you, no, actually there are many of us on council that live adjacent to Yonge Street or adjacent to Bayview, or in my case, adjacent to Yonge and Henderson. The quality of life issue of noise at night is really onerous and important. And I certainly can't approve any noise bylaw that does not try and address that, because there are a lot of people in town that are affected by, who have quality of sleep affected by overnight noise. And so I don't know what the answer is. I would appreciate a response from Ms. Van Leeuwen, but it's just not acceptable that we accept noise 24/7. You know, we're looking at the report, it speaks to quality of life for all. Well, I don't know how we could possibly put that in this kind of report.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, like I said earlier, we have a general prohibition that speaks about noise in general being unreasonable noise and persistent noise. That would be a violation, but then following that general prohibition, we have provided some restrictions around construction activity and waste collection and residential renovations, things like that. So we're not permitting noise 24/7.
Councillor?
And I know that this is noise bylaws are extremely difficult. And I know, I mean, I think this was almost ready to go last summer, or was ready to go last summer, and we're getting it now. So I can only imagine that this has been a very difficult issue to grapple with. But if deliveries are going to be allowed to stores like Metro and No Frills and Home Depot and all the stores that are on the Bayview Strip, if those are going to be allowed, it is 24/7, and it literally it's 24/7. So to me, this is just it's just a joke that we would have a noise bylaw. What good is the noise bylaw, whether it comes from the province or from us? What good is a noise bylaw if it can't regulate noise at night and let people have quiet night's sleep? That's my first turn.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gallo?
Thank you. Yes, I share, I sound like a broken record, but I share the concerns about public engagement. Page 3 of 8, staff are recommending the implementation of a noise bylaw due to changing community expectations and resident feedback in our public consultation. And the public consultation consists of, I'm not exactly sure, on page 4 of 8, it says 70 respondents to the survey informed discussions. And then it says on page, attachment 2, 31 comments of 76 participants. Either way, if it's 76 that participated and 31 provided comments, and all of the pie charts are related to those, it just simply isn't isn't enough for me. I suspect the balance of council, but I'd love to hear your opinions on community engagement. I know I say it often that, and I'm not blaming anyone. I don't know the answer, but we can't implement these types of policies in a community of some 36,000 people and say we're changing it because of public engagement of 30 to 70 people. No one in their right mind could say that that makes any sense to me. And it may be a factor of the times, it may be multiple reasons. Maybe we have to figure out different ways of engaging the public because it's just not enough for me. So after I read that, and that's the public engagement. And if you even take a look at the first pie chart on attachment 2, 60% of people. The question is, do you believe that violations of the noise bylaw during the last 2 years have increased, stayed the same, unsure, decreased? 60% said increased. If it's, we're talking about 30, 40 people. And all the pie charts are the same. They're in percentages, not actual people, not actual numbers. I'd be curious to see, actually I wouldn't mind knowing, through you, Mr. Mayor, how many people actually contributed to attachment number 2, and do we have a geographic area of them? Because the number is really low, but if it's concentrated in an area that is deemed to be noisy, town park, the different areas, the perspectives will be different there than other parts of town. If the 30 or the 70 are equally distributed amongst the entire town, maybe it's a better representation. I don't know.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have the geographical information related to the respondents. Perhaps our communications division can provide that information, as they were the ones that we used PlaceSpeak, and they were the ones that were deployed the public consultation.
Ms. Bennett?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I don't have that information at hand, and I don't actually know for certain that we would be able to provide a geographic distribution of those who participated. That being said, I will certainly find out, and I can send that information to council this week as soon as I'm able to find that out.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. And I'm saying this, and I'd love to hear others. Maybe they have a different perspective. I'm saying this because the impact of this is significant to the community. And I want to get it right. If we're going to make these types of changes and recommendations, I want to have a better cross-section of the town to provide input and what they think. If you take a look at, the Bayview commercial corridor, one of the changes is solid waste collection allowing it between 5 a.m. and 11 p.m. In areas that are not zone residential or direct abut a residential area. Does the hydro corridor between the commercial and residential, is that a definition of not abutting a residential area?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could just get a little clarification, are you talking about whether or not the corridor itself would be subject to the restriction for waste collection, or?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, if there is noise being produced by any of the retail or commercial activity, And now they will be able to get solid waste collection between 5 a.m. and 11 p.m., which I don't believe they are allowed to now. It's a change. And the restrictions are an area that is not zoned residential or directly abuts a residential area.
Ms. Manley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Well, the commercial properties along Bayview, many of them do abut a residential. There is residential between the commercial and the corridor, the hydro corridor.
And there, through you, Mr. Mayor, there are many that are on the other side of the corridor as well, including my home, to be honest. Does the corridor represent or I guess not comply with abutting a residential area?
Ms. Manley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, residential abutting is defined. So the commercial property has to be adjacent to residential for that to apply.
So in that case, all of the homes that are on the other side of the corridor, all of those commercial activities, they can, if this is approved, they can have garbage collection between 5 a.m. and 11 p.m.
Ms. Manley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's my understanding. I just want to confirm with Mr. Ray, as he and our associate solicitor drafted the bylaw.
Mr. Ray?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's correct, Councillor. Garbage pickup would be permissible after 5 a.m. And before 11 p.m.
Councillor?
I think if you had public engagement up and down that corridor, you'd have a lot of people having some serious issues with that. So, I mean, I'll leave it at that. I'd love to hear others in terms of, you know, their view if they're happy with the public engagement of between 30 and 70 people to make these kinds of changes. I'm clearly not. It may be a factor of the environment. I'm fully open to, you know, tabling this, give it 6 months. I would have loved to have this conversation in the council chambers with the council chamber doors open and the public freely coming in and expressing their opinion. Clearly, there's no public here to provide support or provide any feedback in terms of their opinion on the proposed changes. And I think it's a big loss.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions. One, I did hear that we use PlaySpeak to do this. Are we actually still using that application? I thought we got rid of it.
Councillor, and I'll let Ms. Bennett, but I think that because when we did this, that was what we were using at the time.
Ah, okay.
But we've since transitioned to Engage Aurora.
Right on. Okay. Understanding that, and this the engagement was a while ago, maybe there's an opportunity to take another kick at public engagement in a different way, perhaps in the new way. Maybe not as long a time frame as we waited to start to look at this for enactment. I do believe we got a good sampling, but not quite. I think my concern is PlaySpeak in general has been ditched, and it was just because of lack of being able to pull data from there, or the way data gets there and to staff. So I would really appreciate perhaps take another kick at a little more public engagement. There are some significant changes, some not so much. I'm a little bit on the other hand, you know, we're going to put some of the restrictions on some of them. Some of these areas may be a little bit harsher for some things and much less on others. So my second question is, my first one, I'd love to, if possible, we can go around the table some more, but perhaps see if there's another piece of engagement we can do, and perhaps decide how we would like to maybe approach this again with further feedback. And the second question I had. When we looked at Toronto's noise bylaw, did you hear about how their public engagement went, if at all, any? And any feedback from that we feel that this is appropriate engagement levels?
Mr. Ray?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. We did consult with the City of Toronto, speaking to some of my former colleagues down there on the issue. Their consultation was largely focused on noise emitting from things like the entertainment district and noise in multi-dwelling residential type situations. Obviously, it affects Toronto in that capacity. So they did make some changes to their bylaw at a very high level to kind of incorporate some of those challenges that they're facing. And in consultation with Toronto, as well as consultation with the regional solicitor as part of the review of this bylaw, consideration was brought into this bylaw, considering Toronto's updates and feedback from the region.
Councillor?
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. Through Mr. Mayor, to Alec, to Mr. Vry. I appreciate understanding that. There was one item in there, and this is what's led me to think about this a little bit more in terms of public engagement. And it's something that's out of our control, is some of the complaints we received in the public engagement was vehicle exhausts, right? And not necessarily in a driveway, but going up and down the streets. And there's something, I don't know if Mr. Wright, through Mr. Mayor, has heard about these complaints, but there has been a vehicle or two in the southeast part of town. Every night it's bombing around. I don't know who it is, and they're bombing around. And this bylaw wouldn't apply to police matter. So that's for me a personal one, but it's like I'd have to call the police to get that addressed. So I guess, through you, Mr. Mayor, I would like to see us perhaps do another shot at a little more public engagement. I love the fact that we consulted with Toronto. I believe they've got lots, we can learn lots in terms of where their concerns were and some of the things that they put in place. And I guess there's probably been, I should ask this, success through those changes through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Wright. Perhaps you've heard your colleagues hopefully express that it's made a little bit of a difference, but I'm sure that has to do with enforcement, right?
That's right.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. The changes have been met with relative positivity. Staff in Toronto have indicated Toronto did include provisions around loud exhausts. However, from speaking to colleagues down there, it is very difficult to enforce, as bylaw officers do not have the authority to deal with moving violations. And the police have stronger powers through the Highway Traffic Act.
Great, thank you. No, that's good. That's good to know too. It does help the police. That's great. I appreciate that too. So, yeah, I'd like to hear a few more comments, Mr. Mayor, and then perhaps maybe take one last kick at, here's information we've got, perhaps go through our new process for public engagement from a remote perspective, and hopefully we'll get a little more feedback, especially those neighbors that live in unique areas, like Councillor Gartner mentioned, there's noise constantly where she lives. So there's unique issues here and there that can hopefully apply to and benefit everyone, and then not be so restricting to other areas, right? But I'll listen to the rest. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I think there's always that concern that when you make changes to an existing bylaw or adopt different standards, that you're going to be creating new problems and not necessarily solving them. And we've seen that in the past with different bylaws, most notably last term with parking around Town Park and the downtown area. And so, I think the suggestions being put forward about more engagement and taking a little bit more time to make sure that we communicate well the proposed changes and absorb any additional feedback that residents may have, I think is a good one. Through you to Ms. Bennett. Ms. Bennett, we're fortunate we have a couple weeks till council has to vote on this formally. would it be possible for you to take some time over the next 2 weeks just to give it some thought about how else we might engage the residents to be able to communicate these change or proposed changes out and get more feedback and perhaps speak about it at council in 2 weeks' time, just your thoughts about how else we can get the word out and solicit that feedback so that everybody around the table has a greater comfort level of what's being proposed and what the response from the public would be.
Councillor, just to let you know, we only have 1 week until council.
Oh, sorry.
So if Ms. Bennett can answer that as far as, can we do all of that in 1 week's time?
Through you, Mayor Marakis. Certainly, I just to clarify, you're asking whether or not I can give it some thought and come up with a plan for next week, not actually do the engagement, correct?
Just a plan, just some thoughts, yes.
Through you, Mayor Marakis, yes, absolutely. That is not a problem at all. I'd be perfectly happy to speak to that at council next week.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Great, I appreciate that because I do agree. I mean, I think we have some time. Let's take it. Let's see about some more engagement. Let's, reach out to a greater percentage of people within the community and get some more feedback. And then we can make a decision.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Gartner, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to respond to some of the things I've heard. I can't say that I live in a unique area. If you look and actually my area is not that different from Councillor Humphrey's area in that we live very close to Yonge Street and noise certainly carries. And there's a lot of businesses up and down Yonge Street that we're talking about to generate noise here. With respect to trying to figure out where the respondents live, we can't even tell if people with PlaceSpeak, we couldn't even tell if people lived in Aurora. We can't even tell how many times a person has weighed in on something. So, I don't think that, I understand why Councillor Gallo would like to know this, but I don't think that that's a possibility. With respect to question number 5, to me, it's not, I don't understand it. It's not a noise issue. The question is, should we allow early morning deliveries and pickups in commercial, promenade, and industrial zones to reduce large vehicle traffic on our roadways and congestion? I mean, that has nothing to do with noise. Not really. The question is, should we allow the noise of deliveries during the hours of 11 at night and 7 in the morning? The answer might be quite different. In any case, it's we've waited a long time for this bylaw. I think we need to do more public engagement. Toronto did a lot of public engagement for a lot of years in response to a question that was asked. We do need to try and get this right. And I do think we need to try and find out, apart from residential neighbor noise, which is everywhere, I do think we need to find out how people who live in the non-quiet areas of Aurora. I mean, if I have a friend who lives on a crescent not too far from Yonge Street, you never hear any noise there. So those are the people that we want to reach with respect to delivery and garbage pickup noise. I'm not sure if I'm phrasing this correctly, but I have to tell you that when my daughter was staying with me after one of her surgeries and she couldn't fall asleep, she finally fell asleep. She was woken up by a garbage pickup truck at 4 o'clock in the morning. We are talking about quality of life here. Noise has a can have a very negative effect, especially continuous noise, on people's health and quality of life. So I don't know what the answer is, but this is not it. I thank staff for their work. I think this is probably one of the hardest things they have to do, but I certainly can't approve this report.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I think, judging from what I'm hearing, I don't think this item is going to pass tonight. I think the general feeling is that we want to take more time. And given the topic, this is noise, where it infringes on people's properties rights. It's going to be a very sensitive issue, and certainly we do want to get it right. We certainly want to get as much public engagement as possible. Frankly, given the history that we've had in terms of engagement success, I'm not sure how much more engagement we're going to get, but it's certainly worth making multiple attempts to engage the public on such an important matter. I did read this, and it is progressive. Certainly, it has its risk. And through Mr. Mayor to Mr. Ray, is it possible? I really like the administrative monetary penalty system. It empowers the town to take control of the administrative aspect of I guess, all the bylaws and where tickets are given out. Is it possible to go ahead with the AMPS portion without going ahead with the noise bylaw? Or is this all part and parcel an aggregate proposal?
Mr. Ray?
For you, Mr. Mayor. The answer to that question is a little bit convoluted. We would want to come forward first with the AMPS bylaw to enact the AMPS system through the town. That would allow us to set up the policies and procedures to support the AMPS, or the administrative monetary penalty system. They are part and parcel, and that we would kind of need one to do the other. This bylaw, as proposed, does still give us the option under the Provincial Offences Act, but staff will be considering bringing forward a AMPS specific bylaw for council's review and possible enactment at a future council date.
Councilor?
Thank you, Mr. Ray. So are you saying that the staff's preference is to have all the new policies and procedures in place along with AMPS, and you don't want to separate them? Is that what you're saying?
Mr. Ray?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Councillor, that's correct. There are guidelines that are set out by the Ministry of Attorney General in terms of AMPS implementation to ensure equal and fair hearing processes and fair adjudication for residents who are appealing bylaw charges or matters. So we would want to ensure that that is properly implemented first with the supporting policies and procedures prior to using a bylaw to support that process.
Councilor?
Thank you. And like I said, I think the AMPS system is great. You get to, receive 100% of all the fines. So that will certainly be great for revenue instead of splitting it 50-50 with the region. And we have, control over, the lag time or lack of lag time in the system. So that's great. I'm not sure if it's a quick answer, but something for staff to take away is, for something like this, we did this with, I believe last term with parking at Town Park. We did a trial run, and I'm just wondering what the feasibility is of doing a pilot project in one part of town for about a year to see how it works before we spread it out to the rest of the town. In that way, we contain the potential repercussions, whether positive or negative. Well, in particular, if it's negative, and we get a real live idea of how this would work if it's rolled out to the whole community. So I think I agree with everyone that we should have, let's give another try in terms of public engagement. But once that's done, maybe staff should consider either having a temporary, 1-year trial run, or whether we do it as a pilot project in one section of town. I think that would give us some valuable information. And, one other comment is that, given that we have in the middle of a pandemic where everyone's at home, I would imagine if we launch this now, given the sensitivities of noise violations and everyone's at home doing their home reno outside and inside, we're probably going to peak out with all of the education visits and the eventual fines now versus post-pandemic. So for that reason, I think that's another incentive to maybe wait a little bit longer. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Before I go to Councillor Gilliland for a second time, I would recommend to Council. Oh, Ms. Van Leeuwen, did you want to add something to that? Sorry, did you want to respond to that?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. We would have to consult with the prosecutor, because I would see that he would have major concerns in targeting one area, that it wouldn't be seen as reasonable in the courts of law, and that would likely get quashed.
Thank you. So Council, I was just going to say that I would recommend, after hearing all the comments around this table, that if the mover and seconder wanted to just receive this for now, and if you guys are okay with that, I will take that as a friendly amendment by the mover and the seconder, and the mover and seconder are Councillor Kim and Councillor Gilliland. If you guys are both good with that, then we can just put that on the floor, and then we'll just continue the conversation. Are you guys both good with that? Councillor Gilliland?
Yeah, no, I'm good with that. I was going to suggest the same thing.
Okay, thank you. So we'll make that friendly amendment, and right now we are just receiving this. So Councillor Gilliland, second time.
Thank you. I think that's exactly what I was about to do. So that's great. Good catch on the play speak. That platform was. I'm just glad we really got rid of that platform, because I didn't find it at all the easiest tool to engage with the town. The Engage Aurora seems to be a lot easier for the general public to, I guess, engage with. So I'm definitely interested in giving the opportunity for the public to give more feedback. So through you, Mr. Mayor, and Ms. Van Leeuwen, what would be an appropriate amount of time to, say, relaunch a public engagement piece with Engage Aurora for this bylaw?
Ms. Bennett?
Through you, Mayor, and I will then turn it over to Ms. Van Leeuwen in case she has anything to add to that. I would suggest that if we wanted to do this appropriately and actually get meaningful engagement, that we would be looking at a variety of tools, not just Engage Aurora, obviously. We need to take into consideration the current environment with the pandemic, but there are ways of doing it that are not entirely, that don't just rely on Engage Aurora. I have already set up a meeting with Mr. Ray for a couple of days for Thursday. We're going to talk about the communication plan moving forward, and I'll be able to give you a better idea of that next week once we've actually talked through the processes. But I do think that certainly it's not something that we would want to do over the course of a week. It's something that we would want to give some due consideration to, and time for people to engage in the channel of their choice and the time of their choosing. With that, I would just ask if Ms. Van Leeuwen, if you have anything to add to that, please.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Thank you, Eliza, and through you, Mr. Mayor, I agree that we should consider various platforms for obtaining feedback. And one of the things that comes to mind is that when our residents call in, that if we could have an option for them to choose to participate in a survey at the end of their call or something like that. There's various channels and platforms that we can engage the public. And in terms of the length of time, I would think a month. At least a month for consultation.
Counselor?
Perfect. Okay, so I guess by next week at council, you'll maybe have a better idea of what a good expectation would be, and then you would probably require some sort of council direction to report back after a public consultation.
Ms. Bennett?
Through you, Mayor Maracas. Yes, absolutely, Councillor. That would certainly by next Tuesday we'll have a good strategy moving forward to propose to council, and we will seek your direction at that point about with the recommendation of appropriate timeframes and reporting back.
Counselor?
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Council, health break time. See you at 9:30. Council, we will begin. Move to 8.3. Single source technology purchases, Ethernet switches, cell phones, computers. The recommendation is that report number CS 21-049 be received. 2, that a single source contract be awarded to Extreme Networks in the amount of $396,000 for the purchase of Ethernet switches. And 3, that a single source contract be awarded to Rogers in the amount of $225,000 for the purchase of cell phones and cellular plans. And 4, that a single source contract be awarded to Dell in the amount of $1 million for the purchase of computers. Someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Thompson, anyone like to second it? No?
I do, Sandra.
Councillor Kim, thank you. Any comments or questions on this report? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. There's Mr. Malpana. I guess I just want to understand, in part of the report, it talks about staff doing a competitive analysis with the cell phone carriers and with the computer suppliers, Lenovo and Dell and HP. But at the same time, you're talking about piggybacking onto provincial vendor of records and so forth. And so I just want to understand how the two go together to create the savings that you are identifying within the report. Perhaps you can just give a little more explanation through you to Mr. Malvena.
Mr. Malvena?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the question, Councillor Thompson. Actually, the pricing we used was the pricing that's included in those vendor of record and OECM agreements. So we were able to do a straight apples to apples comparison.
Councillor?
And so you were able to see those pricings for the various different companies. So for the example, from the cell phones, you were able to see those pricings in those records for Bell and Rogers and Telus to be able to compare it? Because that's where I'm getting the confusion, whether or not the comparison was done by staff to identify the differences, and then you went to these provincial arrangements to secure the final pricing, or whether it was all done in coordination. So truly, they did the process of getting 3 quotes, so to speak, before identifying the low bidder or low cost.
Mr. Malvena?
Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor. That's correct. It was done in coordination, Councillor Thompson. We used the price of the once you join these agreements, you're allowed to see the pricing. We were able to do a straight comparison between those 3 companies, both on the computer side of things and the cell phone side of things.
Councillor?
Thank you very much. And then I guess just the final question is with regards to the total amount being asked, for example, with regards to the purchase of computers, is the $1 million over a period of time, 5 years, or is this 1 year? What is the length of time that you're being asked for this amount of money? Through you to Mr. Malvena, please.
Malvena?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, for the computers, it's a 5-year contract. So that $1 million is split over 5 years. For the cell phones, it's over 3 years.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Gallo?
Thank you. Just a quick one. In terms of referring back to budget, usually, if I'm not mistaken, we would have a budget sheet or something to identify that it's within budget. Is it?
Miss Van Leeuwen, did you want to? I saw you just reach up there, so I guess you have an answer for us. So go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the switches are being funded through our evergreening capital, as well as the replacement of the laptops. With respect to cell phones and cell phone plans, that is an operating budget line and not a capital project. So we do currently have a budget line, and we'd be saving in that operating budget.
Council?
Through you. So part of these would fall under the evergreening, and I guess, is that evergreening budget divided up into segments and these fit in, some of these fit into, I know it's a big budget, these fit into those segments?
Ms. Manley, did you want to?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the evergreening capital project is combined project, and it's an annual capital project that we bring forward each and every year, depending on the replacement of various hardware. So it includes laptops, desktops. This year it included, we came forward with a report earlier on this year identifying our telephone system was part of that capital project for this year, and a few other items. And going forward, just for clarity, going forward, we will be providing a clearer breakdown of what's included in that annual capital evergreening budget each year.
And that's kind of where I was trying to get to just to help me understand, you know, have we budgeted for this? And if so, are we within budget? That's what I'm trying to ultimately get to.
Ms. Manley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we are within current budget with respect to the switches, and the evergreening is again an annual capital project that is identified in our 10-year capital plan and has been in existence since 2010. And so it is, and like I said, going forward, we will provide more detail in terms of the breakdown and how we're going to spend that money year over year in terms of asset management.
Councillor?
And so, through you, Mr. Mayor, this is before us simply because it's single source, not because you need our approval for budget.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's before you because it is single source, and our procurement bylaw requires that any single source above $100,000 be subject to council approval.
Councillor?
That's it.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this one? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 8.4, use of Safe Restart grant funding. Recommendation that report number FIN 21-021 be received. 2, that project number 73292, picnic tables, benches, and garbage receptacles have its total capital budget authority increased by $25,000 to $55,000 funded by Safe Restart grant. 3, that project number 72469, COVID-19 related facility improvements be created with a total capital budget authority of $72,550 funded from the Safe Restart grant. And 4, that the treasurer be delegated the authority to amend the funding source on council approved projects to use Safe Restart grant funding as appropriate. Someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Humphreys. Comments or questions on this item? Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor to Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel. Just a couple questions. One was about the capital projects, and I was wondering if you could explain a little bit about that $900,000, what that means as far as what that allocation would be or look like. If you can kind of give us a little more detail on that, that would be great.
Moira Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this report includes 2 capital projects. One is to add additional funds to the picnic tables, benches, and garbage receptacles. And what that does is it provides more capital in the parks and along the trails. As we noticed with COVID, many more residents are using our parks and trail systems, and this will provide a benefit to our residents as we move forward. The second one is for facility related improvements. And this is about putting some touchless items throughout our bathrooms, the town hall, and through the kitchen areas to reduce those points of contact to make the overall space a safer place throughout our various facilities that we have. The $900,000 that Councillor Gilliland references is in the table one on page 6, and that's the amount that we forecasted as potentially needed for next year. As we anticipate in 2022, we think there could be some lingering effects of COVID. People may not return to programs as expected, or some other costs may arise. So we've allocated that 900,000, set it aside to deal with issues through 2022, and we'll look at that more closely as we develop the 2022 budget.
Councillor.
Thank you, appreciate that. And just touching on the park benches and receptacles, and I was hoping that maybe through to Mr. Downey about generalizing the term garbage receptacles and just generalizing it, saying waste receptacles, considering that probably a lot of the garbage that's being put in these bins are a variety of things, such as recycling or dog waste and in general garbage. And I'm sure that has been increased due to all the activities of being at home and people getting puppies and walking more. So I was wondering if that was something that we could generalize more to allow us to kind of put our funds towards those products or items that or services that we need.
Mr. Downey.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we were specific to call it garbage receptacles because that's what we have in the parks right now. We do not do recycling in the parks, and we do not do green bins in the parks at this point. As you know, we put forward a council report with regards to waste receptacles specific for dog waste, and we are moving forward with that. In fact, the draft of this report identified dog waste receptacle as part of the funding program. However, it wasn't directly COVID related, so we took it out. We will be moving forward with our dog waste receptacles. However, those won't be funded through this relief program.
Councillor.
Thank you. I guess I can say it's totally not you, but I'm disappointed that we can't generalize it, just based on the fact that I'm pretty sure majority of garbage are probably recyclable paper cups. I won't name the establishments, but I'm sure that we see them everywhere. And if we were really going to do our part in greening that, having that diversity in our services to collect recycling, or as you said, it is a problem, a lot of the dog waste, we could invest in some of that to kind of increase those services. Mental health, I'm sure a lot of people have gotten a puppy during COVID just to kind of, ease their anxiety. So I do think it is all related, but I'm guessing just to specify a dog receptacle or waste receptacle and to increase some of that budget to increase that would be something that wouldn't fall in that category. Is that correct?
Mr. Downey?
Through Mr. Mayor, that's correct. We had that discussion, and it wasn't directly COVID related. We do have that issue. I'm not going to argue with you, and we do have some challenges certainly with garbage in our parks at this point. And in fact, the garbage receptacles, we're putting more garbage receptacles in because we simply can't keep up with the service level at this point. The garbage cans fill up quicker than normal because more people are in the parks. Dog waste within our garbage receptacles is an issue, and we've identified that, and that's one of the reasons we came forward with a separate report identifying new receptacles to be put into the parks and a funding formula for that. But as I said, we had difficulty drawing a direct line between a dog waste receptacle and COVID.
Councillor.
Thank you. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Lastly, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Waters. I did notice that within this report, it does mention supporting the downtown core recovery, and it really touches on the sidewalks, patios, utilization of vacant lot, and from what I'm assuming that would be the Matchel Alley. And I'm just curious if that is something that we're going to allocate some funds, COVID related funds, does that mean that we don't need, that the BIA wouldn't need to allocate those funds that was initially intended for that within their business plan that would allow them to use those funds towards something else in that area?
Mr. Waters.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So when the BIA were doing their budget and the costing out for the Matchel Alley green space was undergoing concurrently. So since then, we have looked at the BIA budget, and they are allocating about $9,000 for promotion, just for the for promotion and entertainment for this green space called Machel Alley. So what we're going to do is we're going to provide through our budget the furniture, the street furniture, and also the grading of the property and any maintenance and upkeeping and any PPE that's required. And the BIA will then provide for the marketing and promotion through their $9,000 allocation through their budget.
Councillor?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Through you to Mrs. Wainwright Van Kessel, just touching upon that $900,000 draw for 2022. I note that we anticipate a greater draw in 2022 due to COVID pressures than in 2021. And I just guess I want to understand why we think that the impact is greater in 2022. Is it because we've been able to mitigate that this year from a variety of ways, from wages and other initiatives, whereby in 2022, as we get back to more of a normal life, we don't think we'll have the same capability to mitigate those pressures should, program revenues and so forth be down? Is that why we have we're targeting to have a greater draw not post-pandemic, I guess, hopefully it is. Hopefully we're back to normal by 2022.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
For you, Mr. Mayor, right now the 900,000 is just a rough estimate. We haven't got into the depths of our budget details yet. But what we have found so far through this pandemic is when things are closed and we are not running services at all, we're able to offset a lot of the revenue losses with savings. But as we return to that hybrid of starting to get back to our normal business, it's the people returning, or if we need to run programs with less people involved. So we're anticipating that maybe something happen there, and we need to make sure that we're saving enough of this money to figure out how this return to normal life looks as we go through the next couple of years. We just want to make sure that we have something there for next year should we need it.
Councillor?
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking along the same lines, and I think it's prudent to do so as well. So get the explanation.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Gallo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, just on the same chart, the next line below, 2021, 2022 lease revenue loss. What, do you have a breakdown of that?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a number of leases that the town has, and we've put an estimate in there for potential revenue losses or delayed revenues that we may have. I can gather some of the information for you, Councillor Gallo, and provide a bit more details on what those encompass and what we're estimating for.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you. The other thing is, thank you for the detail, and I do appreciate it, but naturally questions arise from it on page 239, the budget sheet, the capital project. One of them, the replacement of all faucets, 18 within existing staff kitchens at Town Hall, JOC, SARC. JOC must be relatively new, but SARC and ACC, concurrent manual controls to touch-free models is included in the scope of this project. Estimated cost $19,800. That's $1,100 per faucet, and seems rather excessive. The cost of $1,100 per faucet. Can someone speak to that through you, Mr. Mayor?
Ms. McDougall?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Our staff have gone through looking at an assessment of what we've done to date on other amenities, but in this case, that value of the $1,800 includes not only supply, but install. So that is a bit of a buffer to give us some room, but obviously if we don't spend that entire amount, that fund would be residing and remain within this Safe Start funding. But this was a ballpark we went with.
Councillor?
Thank you. Should have been a plumber. Thanks.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My questions have been asked, except a small one. What is safety equipment for downtown businesses?
Ms. Mary Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor, are you asking about the BIA, the downtown recovery piece?
Yes.
Can I defer that to Mr. Waters?
Okay.
Mr. Waters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am looking through my list here. So we still are determining what that is. It likely would be sanitizer for people visiting the Mitchell Alley, but we have not determined what that is at this point in time.
Councillor?
Thank you. Mr. Waters, I'd be interested when you can give us an update of what that's going to be.
I can certainly do that for you, Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Motions, we have a bunch for next week. Regional report. Would someone like to move that and receive for information? Oh, Councillor Thompson.
My apologies, but did we accept the advisory committee meetings yet?
Yes, we did.
Oh, I lost.
Thank you. Regional report. Would someone like to move receiving the regional report? Councillor Gallo, Councillor Gardner, any comments or questions on the regional report? Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. I guess to you, Mr. Mayor, I just noticed that there was quite a few changes to the the speed levels on a lot of regional roads. And I was just wondering what kind of public not consultation, but awareness, like how do they inform the public of all these decreases in speeding so people are aware? There was quite a few streets. I don't have it quite in front of me. I just wrote a note from the last time we were at GC to mention it, but there was probably about a good, I would say, 6 roads that have a significant, like a reduction on it that people should be made aware of. And I was just wondering how the public's notified.
York Region puts out a media release, and they put it on all their bulletins, and they put it on all their social media. And obviously, if it changes within certain municipalities, those municipalities would be they would be the ones putting out information, as none of them are in the town of Aurora. They don't really impact us. Anything else?
No, I just really wanted to know like how the public was advised. Like, it's great that it's not in Aurora. I did notice that, but that's not to say that people don't travel to and from York Region or travel around in York Region for work. But just, I guess, more side note, just letting the public know to go to, I guess, York Region, york.ca, and I don't know where they would actually look to go look that up, but just to notify them that there has been quite a few streets that have had a reduction in speeds.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Any other comments, questions on the regional report? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. New business. I'm actually going to pass the chair for a sec to Councillor Deputy Mayor Kim. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would you like to?
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Chair. And the reason I passed the chair to you is I actually would like to have council consider waiving the procedural bylaw so I can get a motion in front of us so that we can deal with it directly next week. I think it's imperative. If it wasn't GC right now, I'd be asking for us to approve, or at least discuss it and approve the resolution this week, as I think it's an important matter. It's in regards to the reopening of outdoor activities and requesting the province to reopen outdoor activities immediately. I think just getting it at least onto the floor and making the province aware that we are going to be discussing this at next week's meeting, I think is imperative. So if I could ask for a motion to waive procedural bylaw to to allow for that motion to be added onto the agenda for next week, as it is time sensitive.
Do we need a seconder, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Okay, could I have a seconder, please?
Sorry, they all have their hands up. So
Okay, let's say Councillor Gardner then. I don't see the screen right now, but okay, Councillor Gardner seconds. Could I have a vote to waive procedure here? All those in favor? Oppose? Okay, that passes.
And Mr. Chair, I would just ask for a second if staff can put that up, and then it'll also obviously be added to the agenda, and it'll be sent out to each of you as well individually. But if they can just put it up quickly, just so everyone can get a glance at it, I would appreciate it. I did send it into our clerk's department.
Okay. Can I give the chair back? Are we waiting for?
It'll be up in
Madam
1 minute.
Clerk?
Getting it
Okay.
up for you now.
And Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'll just read the therefore clauses. If you want, I can read the whole thing just so it's in the record.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Whereas medical evidence indicates outdoor recreational activities are vital for mental and physical health. Whereas during times of lockdown or stay-at-home orders, mental and physical activity are vital to the well-being of residents. Whereas current provincial stay-at-home orders prohibit the use of outdoor recreational amenities. Whereas York Region Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kareem Kurji, along with other medical professionals, agree that when safely executed, outdoor activity does not contribute to the transmission of COVID-19. Now, therefore, be hereby resolved that the town of Aurora requests the provincial government reopen outdoor activities immediately. And 2, be it further resolved that a copy of this motion be sent to the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, the Honorable Andrea Horwath, Leader of the Opposition, and all MPPs in the province of Ontario. And 3, be it further resolved that a copy of this motion be sent to all Ontario municipalities for their consideration.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So I guess we'll deal with that next week. And I appreciate it, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate council for waiving the procedural bylaw to allow that. So I guess I'll take the chair back. Councilor Kim, thank you very much for that. And we'll go around the room for new business. Councilor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to say that last week, well, May 10th to the 16th was National Nurses Week.
Is this a PSA?
Yes.
We still got PSA after new business. So if you want to.
Oh, we're still doing new business. Okay, so for new business, I'm just wondering if staff has given any more thought to opening one of our roads to more public use. I actually can't remember how we left that, but I believe staff was going to look into that.
Mr. CAO, did you want to tackle that one?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll follow up and have an answer on that for the next council meeting for sure. I'm not sure what plans we've done. I do remember though the reference to a motion that called for, it was, we had some trouble understanding what the aims were, but I'm not sure if the motion actually ever came.
Actually, I'm not sure that it did, Mr.
Yeah,
CAO.
I think that might be what happened.
The motion never did come, but yes, there were some conversations about it. So
yeah.
Maybe Mr. CAO, if you could look into that and just, and then maybe we can follow up with Councilor Gardner before next week.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anything else, Councilor Gardner? New business?
That's it. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Humphreys? New business? No. Councilor Kim, new business? Councilor Gilliland, new business? Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, Mr. Downey. I was hoping you can get some a little bit of clarity on, I know a bit of a staffing shortage or right now, just because everything's kind of coming to a head. There's been some numerous people, I guess, I don't want to say complaining, but I guess they're a little upset because some of the garbage receptacles have been overflowing. But I do understand that you have doubled up on some and you're starting to make some more rounds. And I'm certain this is because, you know, more people are home, people are out walking. That's pretty much the only thing that we can do is go for a walk and, you know, have our coffee and enjoy the outdoors. And I was just hoping that maybe you can just kind of give a little bit of clarity to the community of, you know, what you guys are trying to do to at least kind of play catch up and try to allocate as much staff as possible to help mitigate the concerns that they have.
Mr. Downey?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the question. As you know, we have council approved service levels. And so prior to us going into COVID, our service level was we would empty garbage cans once per week, and we had staff allocated in order to do that. When COVID hit, we had some staffing shortages because many of our sports fields were closed, and people were using our parks more than usual, and we were in some parks, believe it or not, every day cleaning out garbage cans. So we've moved from once a week to once a day, and we had an opportunity to reallocate staff to those resources because we didn't have sports fields and we weren't maintaining them at the same level. This year, and we did have reduced staff, but this year we have implemented our full staff complement. We have moved forward with our grass cutting and our sports field maintenance in anticipation of it being open in the 1st of June. And so we wanted to make sure all our parks and fields are in proper shape. We have all other duties that we're doing. We're still putting out our flowers. We did that last week, our playground inspection. So we're continuing on with our normal service levels. And yet our parks are still very heavily used. We have doubled up on our staff, particularly in garbage collection. However, it is still a challenge. You have brought to our attention some concerns of some residents in certain areas. We are going to be installing additional garbage cans because once we're there, it doesn't take additional work it doesn't take much additional work to clean up the garbage cans. But we are finding it challenging to keep up with the amount of garbage that we're having in the parks and certainly into the garbage cans. But we're doing the very best we can, and we are delivering service beyond our service level or our maintenance standards at this point.
No, sir.
Thank you. And I really appreciate all the hard work you guys are doing to kind of play catch up and stuff. And who's to say what the new normal is going to look like? So even if we do open back up and, you know, more people work remotely, maybe, you know, when we are doing that service level review, that we need to keep this in the back of our mind that, you know, maybe we have to look at that servicing because maybe we'll need to increase that servicing more in the future if the new normal is more people are working from home and walking about. So hopefully you guys can keep an eye on that, you know, now and until the review comes out and see if that behavior has changed at all and kind of reassess kind of where we put our services that way just to kind of keep the parks clean. With that, just as a follow-up, if everything is lifted in June successfully and we are able to move forward with some outdoor activity, is the town prepared, your department prepared, Mr. Downey, to relaunch the cleanup day that was scheduled in April and perhaps maybe do it later, whether it be June?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we are. I get that question asked quite a bit from my waste coordinator. They would very much like to put that in place. However, until we are in a position where we are permitted to do public gatherings and we make sure we can do this safely, we have postponed it. But the moment we have some of these restrictions lifted, we will be planning a new date.
Councilor?
Perfect. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Gallo, new business?
Just in light of public communication, public engagement, I was wondering if staff of other put some thought towards developing an app, not unlike our garbage recycling app, where there's some, push notifications or notifications, people, download it. And whenever meetings are, they get notified, there's a link to the live feed, that type of thing. I'm wondering if staff have ever explored that option to try to see if we can engage the public in a meaningful way.
Ms. Bennett, and I'll just add one thing as well as, and Councillor, we'll probably discuss some of this next week as well with the motion in regards to Wi-Fi. Part of becoming closer and moving towards being a smart town, a lot of those things will kind of be incorporated as far as looking at an app and trying to see how we can get more easily readable information out to the public as possible. But Ms. Bennett, I'll throw the rest to you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I was actually going to refer to a very similar idea of the idea of smart town and digitalization, and so there is absolutely work to be done in that regard. I would say that right now we don't have any concrete plans in that regard, which isn't to say that we don't. As Council is aware, we will be bringing forward a new communication strategic plan by the end of the year, and that will look forward over the next few years with a view to what the trends are and what we need to do to make sure that we are ready and that we're meeting the needs of the community, not just now but also into the future. And that will absolutely be something that will be looked at. So to whether or not there is anything actually in the works, no. Is it something that we are considering and that we are actively looking towards? Yes.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you. I mean, it just can't come quick enough. It's been years and years and years that I've been saying we just don't do a good enough job, and I'm not putting any blame. We just need to figure that out, how to engage the public in a meaningful way. And it's a two-way street. I mean, the public also has to want to be engaged and want to participate, and but we need to do a much better job.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson, your business? No? Okay. And before I go to PSAs, just wanted to give everyone an update on vaccines. York Region has administered 541,803 vaccines, representing 63% of York Region's adult population as of yesterday. So it's probably jumped up another percentage point. And we're moving along with obviously the 18 to 19, representing 34% have already been at least received one dose. So we're moving along. Earlier today, approximately 51,000 vaccination appointments were open to all adults 18 plus who live or work in York Region, and also individuals 16 plus who are healthcare workers or cannot work from home, and they're part of the group 1 and 2 as identified in Ontario's COVID-19 vaccination plan are eligible to book their vaccinations. So that's an important one, because we all know a lot of our essential workers, grocery store workers, people that work in Tim Hortons, people who work in the drive-thru at McDonald's, a lot of them are under the age of 18. And so I know that the region, a lot of us at the region pushed that we move faster to allow those that are 16 plus get vaccinated, and that's what they can do now. So that's very good news for a lot of our residents. I also did want to bring up that officially, as of May 13th, the town will be moving to a award system for the 2022 term. The appeal was dismissed. In its dismissal, the tribunal stated that the tribunal finds that the process was fair, reasonable, and transparent, and included a consideration of all options, including retention of the current at-large system. And the tribunal further finds that the town's study included public consultation, and that input received both for and against the change to a ward-based system was considered. So we'll have 6 ward councillors next term. I'll move to PSAs. I'll go around the opposite way. Councillor Thompson, PSA. Councillor Gallo, PSA. Councillor Gilliland, PSA. No. Councillor Kim. Councillor Humphreys.
Just to quickly with you, Mr. Mayor, farmers market, the second week was apparently incredible. And lineups around the block, but everyone, again, happy to wait, happy to get out and enjoy the market. I did want to mention that they had record opening numbers. Opening day was 808 visitors. Last week, I haven't got the count yet, but that is really tremendous. So hopefully everyone can come out and enjoy between 8 and 1. All health rules are being followed and successfully. So thanks to staff for helping us, and bylaw staff altogether for helping us make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gardner, public service announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last week was National Nurses Week. Their message was nurses, a voice to lead, a vision for the future of healthcare. A very good vision. And thank you to all of the nurses. And we just have a debt of gratitude to them all. With respect to this week or this month, it is Mental Health Awareness Month. I don't know if anybody's mentioned that. Mental health is important all the time and has become increasingly more important and challenging during COVID. And as many of us have said at this table, mental health issues are health issues, and people should not hesitate to try and get help for them. Also, something very exciting. I've tried to be creative behind me, Mr. Mayor. It's a scarf that we received from Yellow Brick House a few years ago. And it actually says courage. And the Yellow Brick House had an amazing fundraiser gala a few weeks ago. They not only reached their goal, but they went almost 50% above it. And they had the most incredible auctioneer. It was quite an evening. So I congratulate them for the fundraiser and also for the very important work that they do.
Thank you, Councillor. I actually have one. I did want to mention it's another, and I guess it's a little bit of a PSA, a little bit of a story, but it's another example of the impact the pandemic has had on too many of our small local businesses. 51 years in operation in our town, and Omar Shoes is closing its doors. They've been a fabric of the town of Aurora for generations. Anyone that remembers Raz and May, Omar Kamisa was actually a Citizen of the Year back in 1979, and Raz received the 2017 Inclusivity Award as well as the 2016 Good Business Award. They've done tremendous work throughout this town. They've been a staple of this town, and it's absolutely devastating to see what is happening to a lot of our small local businesses, and not just in our town, but right across the province. I think everyone understands that there needs to be a balance, and we need to find it. And as numbers start to come down, we need to look at how we provide that balance moving forward to make sure that some of our local businesses can continue to at least begin to thrive and get out of this pandemic. Because if we don't make necessary changes, and after June 2nd, we're going to see a lot more of these businesses closing, and it's truly devastating to all of our communities. So I just wanted to point that out, that we are losing a great store that was part of our community. And I know that Raz and May and the whole Kamisa family are going to continue to be a part of Aurora and continue to do things within our town. And I'm definite about that. And I know that they'll always continually look to see a possibility of maybe even reopening a store at a later date. And hopefully I'll keep my fingers crossed and continue to work with them and have staff work with them to see if that could be a possibility moving down the road. So, Councilor Gardner, did you want to add something?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to say a little bit of a positive note. Omar, with respect to diversity and respect for diversity, believe that Omar closed his store every day so that they could say prayers, and didn't seem to hurt business a bit. So yeah, a nice little touch in a sad story.
I appreciate that, Councillor. Council, with that, sorry, I just got to pull up my agenda again. With that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Gardner, Councillor Thompson, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Everyone have a great week. We'll see you next week. Stay safe. And if you haven't been vaccinated, book your shot.